And now with the intel minister paired with a few other folks that we're going to get into in a bit more depth, we're realizing that Israel primarily is shifting its focus towards internal repression, actors that are preventing street protests to take place. So it seems like they're facilitating the way for Iran's protests and anti-regime movements to at least have a bit more of a level playing field between them and the Islamic Republic. But of course, there's a lot more to it. There's a lot more components. Definitely easier said than done. But that's it. That looks like where the Israeli division of labor has been focused on. While the U.S. has been taking out a lot of military assets, naval force, sites, Israelis are more focused on the urban areas and targeted assassinations and the repression apparatus.
So you just mentioned there, and of course we are going to get to this topic of these other top Iranian officials. One of them here on the screen, the Israel Defense Forces. So Ali Larijani, this came down as breaking news just yesterday. He was Iran's Supreme National Security Council and the regime's effective leader. He has been eliminated. Jonathan, let's just briefly speak on the impact of this particular death and really how that changes the scope of decision-making right now within whoever is governing Iran.
You're right to cast a bit of ambiguity as to who is governing the Islamic Republic. The short answer might be no one, or a committee of a few people, but that in itself tells you that there's not one person manning it. I know we had talked about the son of the supreme leader. It's debatable if he's alive or even has the capacity to govern, if he's wounded or in a coma. But that's it. That is part of the Islamic Republic's really agenda or strategy. It is meant to function despite leadership decapitation. They had a contingency plan. So if you're a mid-level official, a commander, let's say, of a certain brigade, or if you're a foot soldier carrying out day-to-day operations, you know where your tasks are, whether you have a supreme leader or a national security council or not. You know that you're supposed to regionalize the war, use the drones and missiles to attack civilian infrastructure, Israel and US bases. And once those stockpiles are depleted and those capabilities are removed after the US attacks, then you shift your focus internally, open fire on protesters, because ultimately the Iranian people are the real existential threat. As to who Larijani was, he, interestingly enough, did a little bit of both. So he was, of course, part of the architects that orchestrated the mass killing of Iranians in January. He was definitely a key actor that contributed to the death of about 40,000 unarmed protesters. On the other hand, he was also, as you noted, the secretary of the Supreme National Security Council. That means he was also a military official in his own capacity. He had close ties to Moscow as well, as another way of looking at it. So taking him out not only disrupts the command structure, but it also demoralizes the body of the regime's armed forces. Now they know that there's no way out for them. So I think it's a clear signal that the assassination wave is not done, and Israel and America are going to continue to go after present, future, and present, past, and future political leaders of the regime.
Before we go on to who else is possibly next in line when it comes to these specific targets, Jonathan, we don't get too many live images coming out of Iran. We do have one coming in at this moment. I'm going to take it briefly. This is courtesy of the Associated Press and has to do with Ali Larijani. So the AP saying this: it is the funeral being held for that top Iranian security official. What looks to be here, thousands of Iranians there taking to the streets, waving the flags, and they're, again, specifically for the funeral of Larijani. It brings me to this next point, because I want to talk about Iranians in general. This looks like a mixed feed here, possibly from the state-run news agency. But take a look at that. A lot of people there on the streets. Now, it was just a couple of months ago that we were talking about a lot of these protesters over there protesting against the Iranian regime, protesting against the way that the country was being run. They were being killed off for their protest. But then we're also getting these images of thousands of people there at a funeral service for one of the officials that has been killed. So what is the sentiment there on the ground in Iran? What kind of divide do we see from the civilians that live there? Where do they stand amidst this conflict and really all of the developments that have happened since those initial strikes on February 28th?
I cannot think of any other country with this much of a gap and divide between the ruling entity and the people. The mindset on the ground, talking to folks, is that the country of Iran is occupied by foreign Islamist forces. That's the mentality. And that really tells you how the average Iranian sees these parades, sees these rallies. Well, number one, what you see get displayed on media affiliated with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is by no means evidently indicative of the Iranian sentiment. Most of these people that you see on display right now are part of the Basij militia, basically an underwing of the FTO designated terror group of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. And having grown up in Tehran, I remember during any major event, they would actually bus in people from other parts of the country. So if, let's say, a funeral is held in Tehran, the people that you see, most of them actually not from that area. They're getting transported in because they know they don't have enough of a support base and they want to have a show of force from a PR perspective. So that's really important for us to keep in mind. What you see is certainly not indicative of what's happening on the ground here. But as to how Iranians think, listen, this is a situation that's less than ideal for anyone. No one wanted to see the conflict to escalate to this extent. But nonetheless, Iranians see this as a war that was imposed on them by the regime because Tehran failed to negotiate in good faith. They did not provide concessions, and they regionalized the war. They went after civilian infrastructure as their main target. Ultimately, Iranians see that. To them, there's no way out but through. This is not to say the average Iranian wants to have regime change at any cost. There are certainly pillars that might alienate the Iranian public. We're not there yet, at least. But that said, war fatigue does kick in after a while. But given how the operations have been carrying out recently, and given that Israelis are even going after hyper-local personnel targeting, it tells us that this war is about to enter a new phase rather quickly. Just you look at what's coming out of Jerusalem, the signs that are coming towards the Iranian people does indicate that the next chapter is upon us very, very swiftly.
Speaking a little bit more about some of the images that we are able to get from Iran, Jonathan, what is the status of that internet blackout and that communications blackout that we saw when these protests first started?
Interesting that you would compare this internet blackout to that of January, which is very notable. So right now, since this war started on February 28th, we've seen the longest internet blackout against the Iranians. That said, I'm comparing the footage coming out of the country right now versus when they did in January. Even though the January blackout was maybe about a week or so, we absolutely got no information coming from Iran. There were no videos being posted. I couldn't contact anybody on the ground during that wave. But right now is a bit different. We're getting information, we're getting videos, footage, images from Iranians on the ground corroborating some of the statements coming from CENTCOM and the IDF. That in itself tells you, to an extent, that there may have been some sort of contingency plan in place to somehow facilitate some way of communicating to Iranians from the outside world. This is not to say every person in Iran has access to internet. Certainly is a blockade. There's plenty of people I cannot reach, unfortunately, my loved ones, family members, and friends. That said, the flow of information is not really resembling that of January, which I think tells you that maybe there are more Starlinks into place, maybe more people have VPNs. But another interesting factor there is Israeli and U.S. strikes have also struck buildings that are in charge of censorship. So they've also degraded the Islamic Republic's repression capabilities on the digital side as much as they've done the physical repression.
Let's go back to some of these top Iranian officials that have been killed. One more social media post here from the IDF. Again, this is breaking news that we brought just yesterday. So the commander of the Basij unit eliminated, the IDF targeted and eliminated Gholam Reza Soleimani. This brings me to my next point here. And as I mentioned at the top of this discussion, we've seen a lot of these leaders being taken out consistently, swiftly, but yet new targets still emerge. Every day we hear a new top Iranian official being killed. How many people are involved in running these military operations there in Iran that we have so many top officials, or so many people, I should say, that would be considered top Iranian officials?
It's fair to point out that there's frankly too many of them, and they replace one another rather swiftly. So the regime in Tehran was never a one-man show like Libya or Gaddafi. It was built on parallel institutions. The former supreme leader, Khamenei Sr., he had ensured that decapitation wouldn't be as effective against the Islamic Republic. So now, as you pointed out, there's the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and there's the Basij. And then you have the intelligence apparatus that in itself is quite vast. Then you have the regular armed forces. On top of that, you have the political leadership that is both on the civilian and on the military political leadership. So again, yeah, you're right to point out that there's quite an extensive network of these guys. Another way of looking at it when it comes to strictly numbers, Iran has a population of 90 million. Estimates vary as to how many of them are supporters of the regime. It's anywhere from 10 to 30% of the population, which is still millions. So drawing from that, millions, and you narrowing it down, you still have quite a few people that could carry on the mantle of this regime. So that's important for us to point out. That said, looking at the way that Israel and the U.S. have been eliminating some of these leaders, we yet to really pursue removing the political leadership. So in most of these cases, these individuals are somehow affiliated with the military or the intelligence apparatus. Both are very legitimate targets, of course. But when we see who's left, a lot of people that are affiliated with the reformist camp are still around. There are some signs suggesting that Jerusalem or Washington might be entertaining using someone from within the system, recycling some of these folks. Debatable how effective that would be, or debatable even whether the IRGC would allow that or not. But that said, the two people that you just mentioned, we talked about Larijani, but the Basij guy, Ghulam Reza Soleimani, what's really important about taking him out is that his job was strictly being the enforcer of internal security. So it comes down to him, his cadres that would harmonize and really coordinate the crackdowns against protesters. Again, we're seeing the pattern emerge here. Jerusalem and Washington think they've done enough of a job to degrade the military capabilities. We see them now shift their focus to internal stuff. So in the next week or two, I think we're going to see some major developments.
I posed this next question to one of the experts and one of the journalists that we had on yesterday, who's following this closely. I had seen some reports that possibly there were talks on the table between maybe U.S. officials, Iranian officials to sit down, talk about what's happening here and figure out a solution and how to go moving forward. Have you heard anything about that being a possibility? And also from the Iranian side, who would be representing them in any kind of talks, not even just with the U.S., but possibly other nations in the region, other Western countries? Who would be leading that effort?
We talked about how the political leadership is still intact, and that includes the foreign minister who's been leading a lot of these initiatives. That said, he doesn't have any authority to speak on behalf of the regime as a whole. He needs to get instructions from someone, as you pointed out. So it comes down to who is really orchestrating this. And part of the reason I think that Tehran is really reluctant to pursue diplomacy meaningfully, at least, is because they haven't even had a moment to sit down and actually discuss what they would want out of negotiations. Do they want an end to the conflict, and what concessions are they going to provide? Do they think they hold any cards? So they really haven't had a chance to strategize and really assess the calculus as to what Washington might want, what Israel might want, whether Europeans even have a say in all this. That said, during peace times, they never negotiate in good faith. Under the Biden administration, and right before the 2022 Women Life Freedom Movement, they were heading somewhere, didn't really lead anywhere meaningfully. So no matter if you had maximum pressure, maximum appeasement, war, or Operation Midnight Hammer, we saw no behavior change. We did not see Tehran change its stance. So if anything, the more isolated they feel, the more paranoid they become. And to them, and this is the most important thing there, to the Islamic Republic, concession equals weakness. And the more fragile they become, the less likely they are to indicate any sign of compromise. That sends the wrong message to the body of their armed personnel. It demoralizes their population and support base both inside Iran and regionally. So right now, I just don't see what they would be negotiating over. Sometimes they just negotiate for the sake of negotiations, just to project an image that the situation is calm. That said, I doubt Washington would take them on that offer, given that we've launched such an extensive wave against so many of these officials, and who knows if one of them is going to be next. So it doesn't really make sense right now for us to engage diplomatically with a regime that we're at war in and we're eliminating their officials.
I just want to point out that this is a live blood coming out of Beirut, Lebanon. We do not have a live blood coming out of Tehran or any other city there in Iran, but obviously here in Beirut, it has been active for the past several days, Israel conducting operations. Jonathan, everything changes so swiftly, so quickly here, given this entire situation. If you had to make one final point to our viewers, especially as we look ahead to the next 24 hours, in fact, what is something we should keep an eye out for?
We talked about how there's a new phase of them going after internal repression, but that also means going after the personnel. The Islamic Republic's armed apparatus, talking about all these different parallel institutions, you're still talking about tens of thousands, if not 100,000 or more of these personnel that are remaining. Let's say even a generous estimate of how many of them have been eliminated, about maybe 10,000, which is not that significant. So this is not to say the main body is done. I think what we're looking out for is any signs of defection, them disobeying orders. We've heard information coming out of the Mossad actually threatening these commanders, saying, if you do not join the movement, we will eliminate you and your immediate cadre of personnel. So I think in the next few days, I'm looking at if Israel is going to be going after the hyper-local targeting of squads and units more so, or if they're going to shift towards getting defections out of these guys, out of this personnel. I think any whistleblower information would be very critical. But again, I think this is the most sensitive phase of the war since February 28th.
Jonathan Sayed, an Iran program research analyst at the Foundation for the Defense of the...
Hello, my name is DrPaulCottrell. We are live streaming on Rumble, YouTube, and simulcasting on X Spaces. You can also watch the live stream on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Thank you for joining. The two main news events this morning and over the pre-market trading time period was the Israelis knocking out additional leaders, killing them, and Israel hit gas production. Now, when that news broke, natural gas futures started going up and the oil futures are going up. So let's do a recap of what's going on with the open in New York City in terms of financial trading. The S&P 500 is trading at 6,700. VIX is trading at 22.82, so there's still a little bit of stress in equities. As the VIX goes up, the VIX goes up, that indicates volatility for the SPY, for the S&P 500. Euro USD is trading at 115. Early session trading, dollar is strengthening a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit. Oil is trading at 97.96. It's trying to break $98 a barrel. Bitcoin's trading at 72,000 handle. And the USD Japanese yen is trading at 159.51. It was trading in a range of 157, 158. So dollar is strengthening against the yen and the dollar is strengthening against the euro. When there's a big move in the yen and there's a big move in VIX, that's usually a strong indication of equities selling off. Now, I still have a target for year end for the S&P 500 at 7,400 to 7,800. It's trading at 6,700. If you're smart, you're going to start buying into the broad index. Be wary, be very careful if you buy into individual stocks, because there's going to be a lot of idiosyncratic risk. You're a little safer with the broader index, especially with geopolitical risk. Now, the natural gas futures are trading at 3.0. They've been trading higher. I was hoping that if the news was fine, which it's not, but if the news was fine, I was hoping that natural gas would try to break the 3.0 support level. Natural gas wants to go to 2.9, 2.8. But because of what's happening in the Middle East, it's elevated above the 3 mark. So $3 for natural gas futures is a strong support level. All right, it's having a hard time breaking through that. So it's a very strong support level. So we're probably going to see, until things cool down a little bit, we're probably going to see a trading range for natural gas between 3.0 to 3.15, maybe even 3.2. Now, with oil, this news, oil wanted to trade around 94 and was kind of wanting to, last night it even drifted as much for WTI as 91. So oil wants to be in the lower part of the 90 handle, maybe 91 to 94, 95. So 90 to 95 is probably a good trading range. But because of the news from the Israelis, hitting energy facilities in Iran that were tied to gas production, everyone's worried that there's going to be a spike now in oil costs. So everyone's bidding up oil futures. Now, the question is this just a knee-jerk reaction based on the Israelis' actions in Iran? Probably. But the thing is that if you have a short position in oil, thinking that things were going to be getting a little bit better, because there are ships that are going through the Strait of Hormuz now, but not a lot, but there are ships that are going through. It's not completely shut down. So energy futures wants to go down, but because of these news events, these high event risk situations, energy futures can move quickly in gas and in oil. So right now we're living right through that just within from 7 o'clock to now, which is 9:52, there's been a big move in oil. So we're now trading above 98.13. So how do you manage this? All right. Well, the chances of it de-escalating are higher than let me rephrase it. The chances of oil going to 120 because of some sort of war event is less likely than oil going back down to 90. All right. So today, it's going to be a lot of behavioral angst, a lot of worry with oil futures, and it's going to bid up. And I would not be surprised if we try to test the $100 WTI for natural gas, for oil. Natural gas might go all the way up to 3.1, 3.2. So, but 98 right now. But if there's not retaliatory strikes from Iran on other energy facilities, because that's what they mentioned in the news. So Israel hits a gas production facility in Iran, and then Iran says that other energy facilities in the region are at risk now. Not just theirs, but their neighbors, their brothers, the GCC region, right? The GCC countries, their energy production are now going to be targets. This is the reason why oil's bidding up now. So, like I said, it's really hard to trade the energy sector. Most people just trade the equity sector. All right. So the equities sold off today, and right now they're at 19 points down, almost 20 points down for the S&P 500. But that would be a good time to buy. So in terms of equities, it's time to buy a little bit, get that good dollar cost averaging. So when the war does end, you're going to get that appreciation of that added capital. And I still, like I said, think that by the year end, we're going to be at 7,400, 7,800 for the S&P 500. All right. Now, for energy trading, especially futures market or using leveraged ETFs, it's really difficult. It's really difficult because you can, today's news would be go long, but tomorrow is probably going to sell off. So you're better off probably shorting the appreciation in oil. So the way I'm seeing this, the way I'm playing this is that I'm not going in long oil because there's a higher chance of it going to 90 than to 120, even with this news. So even if there is a hit on other energy facilities and oil goes to 105 or even 110, it'll probably fall back down quickly because these events that are taking place is going to galvanize the Israelis and the U.S. to push even harder to make sure the Strait of Hormuz is opened up. So there's a feedback loop. So when energy sector keeps on going up, there's going to be pressure out of the international community to make sure that the strait is open. Let me give you a case in point here. When oil was starting to trade to close to 120, and then it came back down, what did we hear in the news immediately? Strategic reserves are being discussed to release. That that the international community needs to galvanize and make sure that energy is available to the refineries so they don't shut down. So there's a pressure point in the international community that once we hit above 100, they'll start to galvanize. So if we have a higher oil price above 100, Trump can go to the Western nations and say, we're going to need the minesweepers. You're going to need to help. You need to send the ships. And so their domestic constituency in these different Western countries are going to push the government to participate because they can't afford the higher energy. So there's a feedback loop here. So I personally think don't chase. It's safer not to chase oil going up. It's better to cost average a short position. So when the oil starts to go down, you are benefiting from it. That's the way I see this. Now there's other people that are saying the opposite, but I'm not betting against America, and you don't bet against. I never bet against America. The reason why, it's not because I'm an American, even though I am. All right, so, I'm not saying that just because I, am an American citizen. All right, it's because the United States always finds a way. Okay, even though there's so many problems with it, and there's a lot of dumb people in the United States. About 80% of the population is stupid. 20% is actually moving the society. So, but the thing is that 20%, they'll always surprise you. So don't bet against the United States. So buy equities, dollar cost average into equities, and oil's going down. It will go down. All right, with that, please help support the work that I do by subscribing to all the channels. I have Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. You can also follow me on X and GETTR, TikTok, Buy Me a Coffee, Patreon, Substack. You can also watch all of my audio podcasts, or listen, I should say. Listen to my audio podcasts on my website under Broadcast Radio. You can also listen on Apple Podcast and Podomatic. I also generate news under Broadcast Paper. And then you can watch the live streams on Broadcast Live. But there's many ways to follow my work and to help support. You can also donate on my website through Stripe, PayPal, or Buy Me a Coffee. Please help support the channel. All these videos are for free. And if you pay attention, I'm helping you improve your health and how to navigate through the news and help bolster up your finances. So thank you for joining. I greatly appreciate it. Before we continue, we'll probably go to CNBC. But before we continue, please go to my store and take a look at the great products that I offer. I have ebooks, I have supplements, and I also have course material on pulmonology and immunology. Great way to learn about how the human body works. You reduce the power imbalance between you and your physician, you're going to be in better control of your health. So with that, go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Take a look at the great products that I have, especially the products that help with health and wellness. I have structural nanosilver soaps in stock. You can get it in peppermint, and you can also get it in lemongrass. These are structural nanosilver that will help to neutralize and also improve the pores in your skin. Use this daily to improve your skin. It's very high quality soaps. Make sure you use discount 5. And to boost up your immune system, take magnesium and zinc. But magnesium and zinc also helps the efficacy of vitamin D3. A lot of people don't know this. And magnesium also helps with brain function. And it's really important to improve your brain function. You're probably already noticing that your concentration levels are not as good because of the social media exposure or not reading enough, right? And your just brain function is starting to go down. It's really important to boost it up. Now, there's lots of ways to do it. Proper supplementation, proper sleep, proper diet, and exercise are all helpful. Now, magnesium and zinc boosts up that immune system and helps with the brain function. Vitamin C and magnesium also helps with brain function, helps with the skin, and boosts up that immune system. You can stack them together for added benefit. There's a synergistic benefit to this. So you can take them separately, but better yet, take them together. Magnesium and zinc and the vitamin C and magnesium, get it from my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5. I want you to save some money. You know, oil's up and, you know, you need to save some money, right? So use discount 5, all caps, number 5. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video and all my videos. All right, with that, let's listen in to some of the economic news that's coming in. It looks like factory orders for January up by 0.1% versus up 0.2%. That was the estimate. So it's up, but it's lower than the estimate. So there is a little bit of a cooling that's happening in the economy.
Well, we knew that, though. I think the overall market has been able to handle this kind of stagflationary backdrop that we have here, which is really just about restraint on growth and elevated inflation in the short term, because we didn't really expect much in the way of Fed movement for the next few months. It's going to make it a rhetorical challenge, obviously, after the results. I think the interesting part of how the stock market is trying to digest all this is, you know, it continues to try to lengthen the tether between stocks and oil. With mixed success. Maybe it's indecisive, maybe it's unconvincing. We got this little 2-day low volume rally in stocks, even as WTI and Brent have kind of leaked higher. It's happening again today. Some of that is the AI trade kicking back in. Some of it, I would argue, is the damage already that's happened below the surface to the cyclical parts of the market. So if you look at a 6-month chart, equal weighted S&P versus financials versus consumer discretionary, they've kind of taken some of their medicine at this point. So I think the big question now is, has there been this subsurface correction? Obviously, investors don't want to get too far away from the idea that you could get some kind of de-escalatory move, or maybe we've seen the moment of peak uncertainty. I know that's hope infused. It's not purely based on the objective facts, but that's where we are. And I think it's also a hedged up market. I think that's one thing we're seeing the result of. People are paying up for downside protection for weeks, and therefore you don't have to sell what you own if you feel like you're cushioned on the downside a little bit. The upside hurdles, if the S&P is going to rally here, we're not, you know, you got to break this downtrend. You have these
another thing that you pay attention to is the spread between the Brent crude futures and the WTI futures. Normally that spread's $3 to $4, and it's trading at 108 for Brent and 98 for WTI. So that usually is telling you that there's a complex system. Pay attention to me here. I know this is going to sound esoteric. It's a complex system that's getting out of equilibrium. Your body is a complex system. If it gets out of equilibrium, you may have a heart attack, or you may have, you know, a hyper or hypoglycemia, or something is going wrong, right? Same thing in social systems. And financial trading is a social system. It's behavioral. It's very behavioral. It's a behavioral system. I don't believe in fundamentals. I believe in behavioral finance. I think that that's how the markets work. So there's these feedback loops and behavior, positive and negative feedback loops. And if a normal spread between, let's say, futures is 4, but then all of a sudden it's now 10, and then you pay attention to what's going on in the news, and that's the Middle East, and the Middle East is based on the Brent futures price. then that's telling you that there's some sort of disequilibrium here. And because of that disequilibrium, there's going to be volatility in the prices, in WTI and in Brent. All right. The chances are, because of the spread, Brent's probably going to need to come down to get closer to that normal 4 spread. But also WTI is probably priced a little too high because of the knee-jerk reaction of the news today. So not just absolute price, but take a look at that spread between Brent crude and WTI. It's a little high. That spread is too high. All right. Now I'm not going to go into details, but you can actually trade the spread. But because if you think the spread is too high, then you can short one of the legs to get the spread down. But that's a little bit more complex trading strategy.
Transiting from U.S. port to U.S. port ought to be U.S. owned and U.S. operated. That's been blamed for high shipping costs because allowing international ships into those lanes would presumably lower costs. That is expected to have some impact, although it's not exactly clear how much, on oil prices, particularly on the east coast of the United States. So we'll see what that impact is as the day unfolds. Meanwhile, the president has been expressing some frustration on social media. Take a look at his Truth Social post from earlier this morning. The president sort of considering the idea here of just abandoning the Strait of Hormuz. He says, I wonder what would happen if we finished off what's left of the Iranian terror state and let the countries that use it, we don't, be responsible for the so-called strait. That would get some of our non-responsive allies in gear and fast. The president really frustrated here over about 3 days with the refusal of NATO allies to send naval support to the Strait of Hormuz to help the United States Navy clear that strait and reopen traffic for global oil supplies. And the president there sort of venting that frustration, saying, well, what if we just leave it? They'll have to do something then. And we heard Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, on TV a short time ago this morning saying, look, the United States doesn't need ultimately the Strait of Hormuz because that's for global oil supply. The United States is a net oil exporter, and so the energy exporter, and so therefore the U.S. is fine in terms of supply. It's global prices that we have to worry about. So a lot going on here on the oil markets. Clearly the administration's sensitive, though, to these high oil prices.
And this is the reason why it was so important to understand that going into Venezuela and capturing the heavy crude and making sure that our feedstocks in Pad 3, which is refinery production in Texas and Louisiana, had ample supply. Because we produce in the United States light sweet crude. But the oil sands and oil production from Canada that's imported into the United States, that's heavy crude. So that helped the refineries in Pad 2 and Pad 3, the Midwest and in the South. So when they say that United States is a net energy exporter, that's true. But that's also counting, downstream products like gasoline and diesel. But we also export LNG, so liquid natural gas. So that's helping with the whole export for the United States. All right. But we still have refineries that need heavy crude or medium crude. Medium crude's coming from the Middle East. It's not light sweet. So some of it's heavy and some of it's medium. And they can blend it. Sometimes you can blend it. So these refineries are fine-tuned to take certain types of feedstock, either heavy crude, light sweet crude, or medium crude, or a blend. People need to pay attention to this. Some of our refineries need the medium crude. So when they said we don't need the Middle Eastern oil, that's bullshit. Because some of the refineries do need it.
priced globally. Yes, we are energy self-sufficient for the most part, but that doesn't mean that there aren't going to be material drags if oil remains at this level.
See,
the other question.
what we're experiencing right now with how they're describing the oil industry and for the United States, it's very simple headline. Oh, we're producing a lot of oil, and therefore we don't need the Middle East. Well, what about our refineries and how they're fine-tuned for certain types of feedstock? We experienced this during 2020. Mainstream media and quote the experts didn't tell you the full story. Back in 2020, it was the mainstream media and the talking heads in healthcare, the physicians that thought they understood immunology, which they don't. But so they explained a situation that there was a lot more complicated. There was a lot more nuance. There's a lot more nuance when you over-inoculate the whole population with the same epitope. But the physicians think they know better, but they really don't, because they don't fully understand a complex system like the immune system. Well, the economy and everything in the modern society is anchored to oil. Everything. Your life could not exist without oil, period. So, even quote the experts can't even get it right. This is the reason why I do my channel, because it's about dealing with the nuance. The magic is getting into the details and understanding it. This guy, Evercore, chief equity. This guy, I don't know.
Look, what we don't want to see is the market go down and people take their hedges up. We don't think we're going to see that. We think ultimately, and again, there has to be some thought that this is going to resolve itself such that oil drops below 90 eventually, right? Because 93 in our work is the break point in terms of the stock market. Right. If you're there for 2 or 3 months, you're going to run into problems, right? But the assumption is that's going to ease.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Does anything change in terms of Friday being a big expiration and we're going to kind of roll a lot of that off? You feel like people feel like they're buffered still? No, not really. It's still very much a standoff. And the fact is that when you look at the market in general, and you spoke about this earlier, the dispersion among stocks has been extreme enough such that long-short managers don't feel compelled to take off their single stock positions. But again, they've got these massive downside hedges that in our mind, ultimately, if you get a little bit of good news and you get a sustained break below 90 in WTI, those will start to come off and propel the market towards the upper end of the range.
Finally, we have gotten a touch of corporate commentary on this from Dow, BASF today, the airlines yesterday. Do you see it tilting one way or the other in the coming weeks?
I will say this, what's amazing is the commentary from the airlines. When you think about everything, the energy price, the TSA issues with Homeland Security, and in fact the weather in the last couple months, which has been absolutely miserable, the fact that demand and our proprietary airline surveys confirm this corporate commentary, they're very strong. That bodes well for a consumer that's got resilience.
Julian, come back soon. Good to see you. Good, Emmanuel. Our roadmap for the rest of the hour still ahead. Goldman's co-head of commodities going to join us, talk about the news that we just got from Ayman about the Jones Act, see if that'll move the needle for oil prices.
Plus, DocuSign is down sharply this year as the name gets caught up in the AI disruption narrative. We'll talk to DocuSign's CEO, fresh off earnings, about whether those fears are misplaced.
And after the break, former Disney executive Kevin Mayer is going to join us. Of course, this says Josh tomorrow takes the reins today over at Disney, replacing longtime CEO Bob Iger. Swap the Street is right back.
All right. Let's listen into Al Jazeera. They're talking to one of the White House correspondents.
That's being postponed. What do we know?
Yeah, that's right. Originally, this had been set for the end of the month. Now, the U.S. president's saying that the visit to Beijing will be delayed by 5 or 6 weeks. The U.S. president saying that In fact, he needs to be in Washington because of the war. But it's not just the war that is holding the president here in Washington. It's also the crisis in the Strait of Hormuz. That has affected the president.
Now, I have to interject here. I apologize not giving enough time to Al Jazeera, but it's really important to understand my perspective here. April 1st is going at sundown is the beginning of Passover. So for the Jews, Passover is a major holiday that's commemorating the Exodus from Egypt. It's Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Passover are the biggies. Now, you know, if you're more religious, then it's Sukkot and Purim and all that, right? But Passover is celebrated as a major holiday across the world, all right? But also Passover in the story of the Exodus deals with plagues that happened to Egypt. Now, Egypt, from a very metaphysical standpoint, is not just a country, not just a region. It's a concept. That concept is Egypt was hell. All right. It's what, if we use the English term, Egypt as a metaphysical term was hell. So there was an exodus of the Jewish people out of hell. All right. What the term is Gaulis. All right. But it is Gaulis or Gaulis? I think it's Gaulis. So, but here, all right. So we're moving towards a major holiday that's dealing with the leaving or being expelled from hell. Now, some people, they talk about the purification of the soul when the body dies, and then it goes through different stages, and then eventually the soul is purified in Gehenna or hell. You know, and then eventually it gets to based on one's life, once the soul is purified or washed in this Gehenna, then it will elevate into what we would call heaven or Gan Eden, Garden of Eden. All right. So this is happening on April 1st. And it lasts for 8 days. Trump was going to go to Beijing on March 28th and leave April 2nd. So it was right at the very beginning of Passover. Now, why is this important? Why was this important? The first 2 days of Passover are dealing with the Seder, where you're reading the Haggadah, you're reading the story of the Exodus from Egypt. The last 2 days are also very important. The first 2 days are super important, because that's when big events are supposed to happen. All right. So we have that, and it's about soul roots. The soul root of Jacob and the soul root of Esau, his twin. They battle each other in the Bible. Well, their soul roots also are the soul roots of countries. And there's a battle between Esau and Jacob. We are seeing it on Al Jazeera. We're seeing it on Live Now. We're seeing it on BBC in real time. This is the battle between Jacob and Esau. Now, the soul roots have a wax and waning of energy. If you look at it from a yearly level, okay? So there's 6 months of the soul root being strong for Jacob. And then as the soul root's strength or energy level starts to wane, the soul root's energy for Esau starts to go up. It's kind of like a sine wave, all right? February, March, April, May, June, July are the months for Jacob. August, September, October, November, December, January are the months for Esau. Now, it's like a sine wave. So there's a peak and a trough. The peak for Jacob is April, coincides with the exodus from Egypt, the expulsion out of hell. Now, where's the apex for Esau? So it's August, September, October. Now, if you look at major events that have taken place in the United States that have been bad, it's been in October, but also in September. Because September this is based on a lunar calendar, not a solar calendar. So there's a little bit of play within a couple weeks, 2-3 weeks of back and forth, plus or minus. So September and October are very powerful months for Esau. Now, everyone remembers 9/11. What about Black Hawk Down? Google it. Find out what month it was. What about crashes in the financial industry? What month does it happen in? October. Many bad things happen in October. What about the assassination that took place for JFK? November. That was when Esau was strong. So we have to fix this problem before Esau starts to get strength. Jacob loses its relative strength to Esau, and Esau overtakes Jacob in August. So Trump has to get this thing done when Jacob has the most strength. If not, it's going to be a big problem. So he just telegraphed 5 to 6 weeks. All right. So I have to think about the details here. I got to listen to the details of what they said. Is it 5 to 6 weeks currently, or 5 to 6 weeks delay from the original March 28th? I don't know, because those two are really important here. All right, but is it, what date are we talking about here from the reference point? But the concern that I have from a metaphysical point of view here is that if Trump doesn't solve the problem before July, he has a major problem, because Esau will have more strength and Jacob will not. And something really bad is going to happen to the United States from a metaphysical point of view. Now, with that all set up, think about what's happening with Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is on September 11th, 2026, on the Sabbath. You can't blow the shofar for Rosh Hashanah. You can't blow the ram's horn to silence Satan. Satan gains control of the year because of this. Now, sometimes it's an individual that's cursed. Sometimes it's a community. Sometimes it's a country. Sometimes it's the whole damn world. I suspect that it's going to be the whole world that's cursed. And this opening of the door of the curse is in the power of Esau. Now, it's on September 11th, which is a really bad day for the United States. But not just that, it's happening, it's coinciding with the Sabbath and Rosh Hashanah at the same time. And it's like almost the perfect alignment. It's almost like a perfect storm. This is the best way to explain this. But when this gate opens up of hell, we're not being expelled from hell. We're moving into it. Just like how Isaac, when he was sojourning into Egypt because of the famine, He moved into Golis, into Egypt easily. Because he was coming from famine, and he was moving his family where his son, Joseph, was a major figure in the court of Pharaoh. Egypt at the time had a lot of food, had economic prosperity, and was stable because of Joseph. So Isaac was moving his remaining family and his herds and the community into Golis, into hell, slowly. This is what is happening on September 11th, 2026. We are approaching hell. Now, I know this sounds really strange, but if you take a look at the world and how it's performed, and the animosity that has been generated between conservatives and liberals, between the ultra-right and the ultra-left, between Jews and non-Jews, between even certain denominations of Christians, Catholics versus Protestant, or, United States versus Russia, or the United States versus China, or China versus Japan, everybody is at fault. This is the reason why no one's going to be able to hide. No one. And if you think that you can just somehow export your responsibilities and your actions to someone else, that's not how it works. Everyone goes down to the grave by themselves, and they are accountable for their actions. Everybody. You can't absolve it. So, with that, everyone is going to be judged based on their reactions or lack of action of things that happened after October 7th, 2023. Take a look at your life from right now, which is March 18th, 2026, going all the way back to October 7th, 2023. Are you a better person? Probably not. Did you do something that wasn't selfish? Did you actually do something that was over and above your own little world? Most people did not look at the situation and try to make it better. What happened was there was more infighting. More infighting within the Jewish community. There was more infighting within the United States community. More infighting within the Ivy League, between certain staff, faculty, and students. Within the student body, there was infight. Everybody's at fault here. Everybody. Even me. Everybody. There's no one that's going to be able to get out of this. Because we didn't see the sign that there was an existential threat to our livelihood and Western ideals, and that we were not willing to destroy Amalek, which is attached. Amalek is attached to Esau. We weren't willing to do that. We've tried to find ways to go, well, America first. We're going to just stay at home and not do anything about it. You're going to get cursed by doing that. Look at what's happening with the infiltration of the caliphate in Europe. It's happening even in the United States. Look at Hamtramck, Michigan. Look at Dearborn, Michigan. Look at what's happening to New York. What about London? You don't think that there's a takeover? Pay attention to what's in the Quran. The Quran is colonial. But yet, you have these liberals or ultra-liberals saying, oh, there's white privilege, and that there's, these countries that are developed, they're just because of colonialism and all this. They're not paying attention. Islam has built-in colonialism. That's what the caliphate is. You'd rather align yourself with the caliphate Or would you rather align yourself with the Enlightenment? So society has failed the test. They have failed. And now it's time to pay the price. That's what's happening here. All right. Let's listen into, well, Tulsi Gabbard is speaking, I think. So let's just listen in a little bit.
Efforts, primarily in Iraq, Somalia, Yemen, and Syria in 2025, were instrumental in removing key terrorist leaders and operatives, degrading the ability of Al-Qaeda and ISIS to quickly reconstitute its leadership and plan large-scale attacks against the homeland and U.S. interests abroad. Strict U.S. border enforcement measures and increased deportations of individuals with suspected links to Islamist terrorists have reduced access to the homeland and removed some potential sources of future terrorist attacks. Since January, U.S. officials have only had a handful of encounters at our borders with individuals associated with terrorist groups. This is a positive trend. However, our interagency coordinated efforts to continue to identify, locate, and remove known or suspected terrorists who may already be in the United States continues with vigilance. In 2025, there were at least 3 Islamist terrorist attacks in the United States. Law enforcement disrupted at least 15 US-based Islamist terrorist plotters. Roughly half of last year's disrupted plotters had some online contact with Islamist terrorists inspired by Islamist foreign terrorist organizations abroad.
Now, because we as a society, not just in the United States, but the world, Western Enlightenment theoretical framework, countries that align to that, failed the test. Now what we have is a cancer across the world. And it's metastasized. Now, how are you going to get it out? The human body is the example of this world. And this terror, this Amalek, this Esau. Now, Esau gets a little complicated because Esau actually repents and splits into a positive Esau and a negative Esau. So when I say Esau, I'm talking about the negative Esau. But this negative Esau is still aligned to destroy. This is, the metaphysics manifests itself in our plane, in the physical. We are seeing with this Islamic terror, this is negative Esau. This is the trying to kill off or trying to kill Western culture, the Enlightenment. But we failed. We thought that, oh, we can still have our football and our pizza and everything's going to be fine. We don't have to worry about what's going on in Europe. We don't need to worry about what's going on in the Middle East. We don't even have to worry about what's going on in Asia. Wrong. Your life in the United States, we've been blessed, but it's because of the hegemonic power that happened after World War II. Now, that doesn't mean that we've managed our hegemonic power correctly. We haven't. But the reality is that your lifestyle is going to radically change if we lose. You're going to have higher prices, and I'm not talking a little bit, I'm talking hyperinflation. Most people in the United States that are living today don't understand hyperinflation. They've never experienced it. Never. Because we haven't seen hyperinflation. Well, back in the day, well, they're all dead. We haven't seen hyperinflation. We don't know what it means. Do you really know what it means to go hungry? Most people in the United States don't. Do you know what it means to not have means to live for years? what that means. Destitute poverty doesn't exist in the United States. There's poverty, but it's all relative. It's not destitute. So if the United States doesn't get their act together, we're gonna understand what hyperinflation means. We're gonna understand what hunger means. We're gonna understand what needing something means. Because we weren't willing to fight. We weren't willing to actually do the right thing. If you think I'm wrong, why don't you just do a sample of social media and see where the consciousness of the society is? Do you think that it deserves a blessing? Do you really think it deserves a blessing? Let's just use a research question. Does the world or the United States citizen deserve a blessing? And if you are honest with yourself, the answer is no. So we've had a porous border, just like Europe. And now we have a metastasized cancer. Now, what are we going to do about it? Are we just going to allow a mayor to just eat on the floor and have rugs in New York City? This is the city that was attacked on 9/11. And we stated to the world, we will never forget. And guess what? In 2026, we have a fucking Muslim in the mayoralship. Does that make any sense? And this is not about Jew versus Muslim. It's the concept that Islam, its DNA within the Quran, is colonial. That's what the whole caliphate is. What they want to do is say, your culture is going to be subservient. Your culture is going to be pushed to the side, and we're going to start instituting our culture. You don't believe me? That's exactly what happened in Michigan for Dearborn. If you don't believe me, take a look at what's happening in Hamtramck, Michigan. Wake up. It's happening. And it's starting to happen in New York. Now, New York is the heartbeat economically for the whole country. Now, if your heart is diseased, do you think you're going to live for a long time? So maybe we need to find a cardiologist and fix the fucking problem.
And ISIL threats. She also talked about the rise of China and Russia and Pakistan, their missile capabilities there. She did refer to Iran briefly. She said Iran was understood in their assessment could be developing a space-capable nuclear missile, depending on the progress of Operation Epic Fury. That's the name of the U.S. military.
Now let's do it. Let's go into a time machine and go back to the Cuban Missile Crisis. All right. I think that was 1961. Maybe it was 1962. I'm not sure. It was April. Was it April? I think it was around April, but I wasn't alive at the time. But the thing is that we had a president of the United States, JFK, that was listening to his generals, and the generals said use nuclear weapons. And he and Bobby were going, that doesn't sound too good of an idea, but maybe we have to. And he was getting closer and closer and closer to using nuclear weapons. But then he had a back channel talking to Khrushchev at the Soviet Union. And his back channel was, they were trying to communicate and trying to de-escalate this. And the Russians didn't like our move in Turkey with ballistic missiles. And they felt that it was right, the Soviet Union, to put ballistic missile nuclear capability in Cuba as a deterrence. So, behind the scenes, JFK and Bobby and Khrushchev and maybe some others decided, you know what? Maybe we should pull out of Turkey. So the Russians would de-escalate in Cuba. And that's exactly what happened. If we listened to the generals, we would all be either dead or never born. But we had someone that was intelligent, that was an intellectual as president. Now, Trump is blessed. JFK was not blessed. It's obvious. JFK had a lot of physical problems, Addison's disease, a lot of back problems. But he was an intellectual. And he was able to see through the fog and question his generals. Because if he didn't, we would never have been born. Now, fast forward to 2026. I voted for Trump 3 times. I want Iran destroyed. But Trump is a lucky guy. He's a blessed. Why? I don't know. I don't get it. But I'm not God. But he's not an intellectual. And this can get out of control, and a chaotic event can happen. And you're going to start hearing more and more of tactical nukes or some sort of, weapons of mass destruction. And I'm very worried about the barriers of entry, the low barriers of entry for biological and chemical warfare. You can kill half the population of the world by manipulating pathogens in 1,000 square foot building. 1,000 square foot building. How are you going to find that on a satellite? And the Iranians are smart. They're not dumb like the people in Afghanistan. So it's a big problem. Now, when you take a look at what's going on in the international community, what's going on in international affairs, and you couple it with what I've been saying about the metaphysics of what's been going on, we're living in scary times here. And it's not a guarantee that America is going to be able to pick the right path. Now, I still hold, with hubris, I still hold, don't bet against America. But I could be wrong. But I'm going to die on that hill. I'm not betting against America. I'm not going to hide. I'm not going to, say, well, America's all bad. Like so many other fucking podcasters out there. This is a battle of civilization. We better fucking win.
It's not its first war in the Middle East. It's not its first war to bring down a regime. We had seen this in 1991, although the US chose not to bring the Saddam regime down. We saw this in 2003. We saw this in Afghanistan and beyond. So they know what they are doing. Both of them. There is a strategy on the ground, and it is escalating in a specific direction. Whether the Iranians would be able to retaliate, I think that's to be seen.
We're just going to interrupt you there for a second, because I do want to take us back to the Senate hearing. Tulsi Gabbard still talking. Let's listen in.
Attacks on its leadership and military capabilities. Its conventional military power projection capabilities have largely been destroyed, leaving limited options. Iran's strategic position has been significantly degraded. The US-led maximum pressure campaign and snapback of European sanctions added additional pressure to an already bleak Iranian economy, resulting in mass protests earlier this year that Tehran suppressed by killing thousands of protesters. Even if the regime
what's
remains
very
intact.
interesting about her is that she's been very quiet in the media for most of the Trump 2.0 administration. And then all of a sudden she's starting to pop up again.
Is that if a hostile regime survives, it will likely seek to begin a years-long effort to rebuild its military, missiles, and UAV forces. Prior to Operation Epic Fury, the ICS says Iran was trying to recover from the severe damage to its nuclear infrastructure sustained during the 12-day war and continued to refuse to comply with its nuclear obligations with the IAEA, refusing them access to key facilities. The ICS says that China, Russia, and North Korea see the United States as a strategic competitor and potential adversary. Iran has long viewed the U.S. as an adversary and is engaged in active conflict with the U.S. as of today. These four countries, the ICSSs, are likely to continue their selective cooperation with each other, which could bolster their individual capabilities and threats to U.S. interests more broadly. However, currently these relationships are primarily bilateral on selective issues and depend on broader circumstances, divergent sovereign interests, and in some cases, concerns over directly confronting the United States. These factors, the ICSSs, are likely to constrain their relationships. Finally, conflicts on the continent of Africa are likely to persist through 2026 due to poor governance, economic demands, and external support. Tensions continue between Ethiopia and Eritrea, which could rapidly accelerate to conflict. Contentious national elections in Somalia could distract the federal government away from counterterrorism actions against al-Shabaab, which continues to conduct terror attacks while providing funding and propaganda support to other elements of al-Qaeda.
And you've been listening to Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence. She's
of course, they pivot away.
Heads of intelligence in the U.S. who are currently giving
heaven forbid
Senate committee. This is an annual hearing. It usually looks at
heaven forbid Al Jazeera actually plays what she's saying to Congress about the crazies in the Middle East. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. I know that what I'm saying may prevent you from sleeping. I apologize. Get the good night formula. Why? Because it has tryptophan, melatonin, GABA, and passion flower to allow you to get into 3 cycles of REM sleep and deep sleep. If you get good sleep, you're going to slow down the aging process, detoxify your central nervous system, consolidate memory, and you'll be well rested. If you have chronic sleep deprivation, you are increasing the chances of early onset of dementia, and you're going to age faster. So please go to my store and get the good night formula. Now, it's really important to pay attention to me, because I have some unique insights, self-evident. Get the clarity factor. Clarity factor is going to get rid of that brain fog so you can actually pay attention to what's going on. Because guess what? The United States has cancer right now. All right? There's a caliphate that came through the porous border. We better wake up. Now, clarity factor is going to get rid of that brain fog, allow you to concentrate on tasks. You take it every day. Make sure you drink it with filtered water, but take it every day. And what you will notice is that your memory will improve and your cognition will improve. What's happening is that you're going to be able to concentrate, and dendritic connections are going to improve. Your linking of different neurons together and building a neural network, and the speed of thinking will improve. So this is a great way to slow down the aging process for your brain function. So please go to my store, get the clarity factor. It helps support the work that I do, you know? I mean, how many other people are ranting and raving about, we better wake up? Vitamin B complex. Vitamin B complex is super important to take if you're 40 years of age or older. Why? Your cellular metabolism goes down when you get older. Well, vitamin B complex fixes that. How? Great question. Vitamin B complex has vitamin B1 through B4. And those are really important vitamins for your electron transport chain to build ATP so you have more energy, so your mitochondria is healthier. Also, vitamin B complex has B12 to help to protect neurons. Super important when you get older. And oh, by the way, the aftershock of the 2020 crisis, there's going to be a lot of people that have early onset of dementia, problems with their neurons, problems with their peripheral or central nervous system. You better start taking the right supplementation. Get the vitamin B complex. Or, just listen to Fauci. It's up to you. I don't really care. Now, probiotics, super important. Good health starts at the gut. You can get it in a powdered form or a veggie cap form. I prefer the powdered form because I mix it with my lunch. But either one is very high quality. Now, when you take a good probiotic, you're reducing inflammation at the gut. You're reducing leaky gut syndrome. That's really important because a lot of people that have leaky gut syndrome, that's where allergies come in, because if you start getting proteins in your bloodstream, your body starts making antibodies. And that's how you become allergic to certain types of foods. So it's really important to actually have a good gut. So if someone says, oh, I got a lot of allergies, well, that's because your gut sucks. Now, getting a good probiotic, you're bringing down the inflammation, you're boosting up your immune system at the gut level. Your IgA, which is a type of antibody, will start to increase. You're going to have higher concentrations. Your mucosal barrier is going to increase, so your gut's going to be healthier. Your metabolism will increase. Your energy absorption will get better. You'll actually need to eat less. See, people need to eat more because their gut can't process the food. And then you start having metabolic problems. Well, if you have a good gut, maybe you don't need to eat as much. You ever thought about that? And also, it's going to help with brain function. A good gut actually allows you to sleep better. And again, when you're getting rid of that brain fog and you're sleeping better, you're going to have better neuroplasticity. You're going to think better. You're going to have better memory. So good gut also means good health. So please go to my store and get the probiotics. All right. With that, make sure you go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. I want you to save some money, all right? As we go to hell. All right. Let's listen in to Bloomberg talking about the oil markets and market rebalancing.
Jeff Curry of Carlyle writing this: the cost of rebuilding and recovering from the Hormuz shock will be enormous and underscores the regime change towards physical assets. Jeff joins us now for more. Jeff, welcome to the program. It's always good to catch up with you, sir. Fluid environment, so allow me to go through the headline of the last 5 or 10 minutes or so. One headline, one report coming from Iran that their energy assets have been struck. Now, I have limited information beyond that, but Jeff, from your standpoint, in the week since we last spoke, has this got worse or better?
Worse. I like to call it molecular contagion. Last week we were talking about shortages in Singapore. Prices of jet fuel spiked to $230 a barrel. This week, it's in Rotterdam. Rotterdam's $220 a barrel. Thailand, Philippines, New Zealand, Australia. So this thing's going intercontinental. And then, so you look at Singapore, Rotterdam, the spread, there's no more price spread, there's no more spare barrels, there's no policy fix, it is just busy.
Now let's think about what he's saying in the context of what I was saying, that how the world was acting after October 7th and how social media, how much demonization that's been going on. And a lot of people thought that they would be okay because keyboard warriors, they think they're safe because they're behind a screen. They don't realize that there is no island for anybody. There's no man is an island. Everybody's connected. And our actions affect others. We may not understand it right away, but it may take years to manifest, or it could be immediate. But our actions at a societal level after October 7th, we're being cursed. You're starting to see that we're walking into something really bad. Now, we thought that, you can just demonize certain types of people. You'll be fine. And okay, all right, you really think? You think River to the Sea was okay? You think that, complaining about Israel in an existential threat and needing to knock out Hamas and Hezbollah wasn't justified? Oh, all right, we'll see about that. Because we're blessed, but that blessing could be taken away. And how bad would your life be when that blessing is taken away? Probably pretty bad. So, let's continue.
point. I want to emphasize these are physical supply chains. The idea of around financialization and the ability to print money doesn't apply here. And I think the title of that piece says it all. You can't print molecules.
Jeff, with that in mind, where and how do you think we're underpriced this risk still in financial markets?
That's the peculiar thing about this, is that you look at the paper markets, they've entirely disconnected from the physical markets. Crude oil on an Oman basis, on the other side of the strait, the side that's free, spiked to $173 a barrel yesterday. Crude delivered in Asia is a blend of Dubai and Oman, which is trading somewhere around 130 and 170. Today, this morning, they're call it 120 to 150. So you're delivering crude into Asia at somewhere around $130 a barrel. Product prices are spiraling above $200 a barrel. So the disconnect is between the paper market, which is sitting around 100, and the physical market, which is showing a very different environment.
Yeah. Jeff, some people have speculated that's because of certain types of manipulation in the futures market, and that's the reason why you have seen this gap blow out. Do you think there's credence to that?
You could argue that Monday last week, there was a mysterious 11 million barrel seller. I don't want to get into that. It's not enough to really change the dynamic. I think that the bigger factor that was likely driving WTI and Brent staying lower is the price of Urals, Russian crude oil. It's rallied $65, $70 a barrel once they took off the sanctions. So WTI and Brent were the high cost barrels, and Russian was the cheap. What happened? You closed that gap. And now that you've closed that gap, you don't have any more spare barrels in the system, and this rest of the complex likely to start to rally. I go back to the point that John started with is, we're dealing with an enormous supply shock. And by the way, the supply shock is almost equal to the demand shock during COVID, and we know what that did to global supply chains. So I think at $100 a barrel, this thing's mispriced, even against the physical market.
There is a sense, though, that this time is a bit different than, say, the 1970s in terms of the world's reliance on oil, especially China, how much they diversified to electric vehicles, to nuclear energy, and other places as well. How much do you think that that is going to be the growing trend, to diversify the sources of energy in myriad ways beyond what we were doing even during the so-called Green Revolution, as people try to avoid these types of shocks?
Well, I absolutely... Something that used to terrify me in my business was doing my finances. So now I use Zero. It generates a lot of reports that help me make sound decisions. When I think I'm slow, I can look at Zero, and Zero's like, no, you're still doing good.
Well, I absolutely argue that the renewables, nuclear power, are born out of the 1973 energy crisis, and this is going to unleash an enormous amount of investment into renewables, nuclear power, and other localized energy sources. The problem, though, is we call this the new dual order. The problem is that we haven't got to that transition where we have electrified everything, localized it. And the type of oil consumption that's left in the global economy is critical. And so if you pull those barrels out of the system, the rippling effect or the cascading effect through global supply chains is going to be significant. You go from gas to urea, urea to fertilizers, fertilizers to the dinner table. Or you go from LPGs to synthetic fibers to cotton. You switch out of soybeans and corn into cotton. By the way, I think the best sector to try to get value in right now would be agriculture, because it hasn't priced it in.
Jeff, when it comes to barrels coming off the market, this came from an industry consultant in terms of China. They're looking at potentially a drawdown in commercial and operational stockpiles.
It's interesting.
As much as
I don't trade big ag at all. I just focus on the energy sector and broad index for equities. But because you're not going to have the fertilizer, the yields for planting should be going down. And that's going to manifest itself depending on the crop, but and depending on if it's the northern or the northern or southern hemisphere of the earth. But you're going to see that manifest in the United States in the fall. Now, what did I say about the fall? October is a major strength for Esau. So we may actually have less food production. So energy, not because of the energy crisis that we're seeing, if it keeps on going, this is going to hit the big ag industry, and future prices for corn, wheat, soybeans are going to skyrocket because we're going to have less food.
In barrels a day. That can happen over the next 4 to 6 weeks. What would that mean for the price of crude?
I think the key point is once you exhaust those inventories, there's nothing left. Think about it this way. You have demand up here, supply down here. Once those inventories are exhausted, boom, you have to bring demand down in line with supply. And to do that,
energy is going to, if that happens, and we use up all of the reserve, there's two problems. Well, we don't have any reserve left, and the crisis still continues. But oil prices are going to skyrocket. And now you're talking $200, $250 a barrel of oil. That will have a feedback loop and cause aggregate demand to go down because there's going to be a major recession, maybe even a depression, and major financial problems. Now, the countries heavier in debt, the household debt is increased. You can't get out of this. And this is what I'm saying. The curse is starting. The shadow of the curse is starting to hover. It's moving in like a storm. All right? Because we didn't do the right thing. We didn't solve the problem with Esau. And so it's just coming in, and it's going to force pain on everybody. It's going to affect the energy sector. It's going to affect the agricultural sector. It's going to affect the financial sector. They're going back to the analogy of the plagues of Egypt in the Bible. There's plagues happening. They're starting to emerge.
you're going to need prices far higher than where we are right now. I like to do the mirror image of COVID. Let's go back to COVID. It was the exact opposite. You had a situation which you had demand up here and, the other way. You had supply up here and demand down here. And so what happened? The demand collapsed. Eventually you filled all the inventory capacity in the world and you had to bring supply down and demand immediately. What did that require? A minus $37 a barrel price to create that rebalancing of supply and demand. Now we have the exact opposite environment. So just imagine what it's going to do to require that reduction in demand to bring it in line with supply if it took a minus $37 price to create that rebalancing back in 2020.
So Jeff, I'm going to ask you the question. What would it take? What's the opposite?
250.
I'm going to stick to the same answer I gave you last week. Get long, buckle your seatbelt, and hang on for the ride. We'll know when we start to get to that point where the system starts rebalancing. But I want to emphasize, don't underestimate the type of volatility. If you take European gas in 2022, we saw Russia cut it.
So
the
market
ignored it in June.
Let me tell you how I think what's going to happen here with the oil, and the operations in Iran. Trump and Israel have to get this over by the end of April. Why? Because each subsequent month, Esau is going to be gaining strength and Jacob is losing strength. And that inflection point where Esau actually has more strength in relative to Jacob is after July. So they have to end this by April. Now, that may be what Trump is telegraphing, saying that this is going to be postponed for 5-6 weeks for the summit between the United States and China. So that gets you into the end of April, beginning of May. All right. If we don't solve this problem, then oil is going to continue to go up. But there is this, it's dangerous to try to try to long oil right now, because the probability is more likely that we'll be able to de-escalate by the end of April, beginning of May, versus not. But if we pass the Rubicon and it's still a problem, and the Strait is not moving oil, and there's lots of energy facilities destroyed in the region, all bets are off with shorting, and it's going to be longing. And oil's going to go to 200, maybe 250, and there's going to be a major recession in the world, maybe even a depression. But in the near term, 2 to 4 weeks, I think the probability of oil going up is less, and the probability of oil going down is more. And that trading range that I think is around, for WTI, about 90 to about 95. Not 95 to 100 or 100 to, 110. I don't think for the next 4 weeks, unless Israel and Iran continue destroying energy facilities. So it's really important the United States gets a handle on this.
By August and September, you were at $300-400 a barrel. You know where prices were in December of that year after you destroyed so much today? They went negative. So I'm not going to say oil's going negative, but what I'm trying to tell you is it's going to be a really bumpy ride. You've seen no evidence of demand destruction that rebalanced this market yet. So we haven't even really started the rebalancing process yet. So the upside here, I would argue, is substantial. Again, we want to be long. And I look at the market, it's shorting energy stocks and getting long everything else that is short energy. I think you're picking up pennies in front of the steamroller right now.
Jeff, we buckled up. That's why we have you on again this week. Can you give us a range of how high the prices could go? I know you don't want to give us an exact definition of where you think Brent oil is going to hit, but give us a range of when you say get long. I mean, how long are we talking?
But look at Oman's already traded at $173 a barrel. Jet fuel in Rotterdam is $220 a barrel. In Singapore, it was $230 a barrel. And we haven't started the rebalancing process. All we have seen is what happened in places like Thailand and China hit export bans that then creates ripple-on effects and shortages. Then you have the hoarding that begins to take place. You're $8 a gallon gasoline in Los Angeles right now. So, the upside here, again, I don't want to speculate on how high, but you've already witnessed something like 173 in the physical market. So that's my point here. There's a massive disconnect between the physical world and the paper world. And the paper world includes the financial world. I like to point out it was in January of 2020 when COVID hit. I remember I was looking at the what was going on in China. It was the second largest economy in the world, just shut down. Stock market rallies, oil is hanging in there, not selling off. And I'm going, guys, we got to get short this thing. You can't hit the global economy with a shock of that magnitude and not expect bad things to happen. And we have the exact mirror image of the same similar size shock hitting the world right now. And the market on the paper and financial side is not keying off the signals that it's providing at this point in time.
So, Jeff, at some point it gets real for the market. And with COVID, it was when the northern Italian cities started to shut down. There was a sense that this was getting real, that it was spreading beyond China, it was hitting Europe and could hit the US as well. What makes this get real? What closes the gap between physical and paper markets?
I think it has to be visual images of real shortages in the United States and in Europe. Now, the US will be hard, particularly if they do export controls on that. Europe will likely be the first one to get it. And I think the implication here is the U.S. believes it's safe because of energy dominance. And this is the point I made it last week. From an equity market perspective, that equity market in the United States is a global market. All of those Mag 7 companies earn their earnings in Europe and Asia and all over the world. So when this energy crisis begins to hit places like Europe, it's going to impact the earnings of those companies that sit inside the U.S. because the U.S. equity market is not a U.S. domestic market. It's global, so it'll feel the impact. And I think that if the Americans are going to feel it first on the wealth impact before they'll ever feel it in the at the income cash flow level. The Europeans, unfortunately, they're likely to feel it at both sides relatively soon.
I still think that oil, if Trump can stabilize the region and control the Strait of Hormuz and prevent oil facilities being destroyed and natural gas facilities from being destroyed, then oil is going to go down. All right. So again, I'm betting on America. All right. Not against America. It's too, a lot of people are betting against America. I'm not betting. I never, this is my die on the hill moment, I guess. Never bet against the United States. All right. Now, maybe, I'm wrong, but I don't think so. Short oil. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the lignans. Lignans will help with your immune system, your endocrine system. Bring down inflammation and soak up free radicals. Super important also to help with your cardiovascular health and your brain function. A lot of people don't realize soaking up those free radicals and bringing down inflammation helps to protect your neurons, reduce that inflammation. If you have chronic inflammation at the neuron level, guess what? Your proteins start to misfold, neurotransmitters aren't produced properly, the mitochondria in the neurons start to die off or start to get diseased. And don't be surprised that if you have chronic inflammation at the cerebral level, early onset of dementia. So it's really important. Bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals, and you're slowing down the aging process. Ashwagandha root also helps to control your cortisol levels and your blood glucose levels. When you do that, you're helping your immune system and you're helping your cardiovascular system. And if you have a better cardiovascular system, you'll have better blood flow. If you have better blood flow to your brain, your hippocampus is going to be amply supplied with nutrients and blood. Therefore, your neurons will be healthy. As you get older, especially, with clogging up your carotid artery, blood flow to the brain starts to diminish. Don't be surprised that if you have bad blood flow to the brain, that you get early onset of dementia. So cardiovascular health is really important. And a lot of people don't realize in the United States, your cardiovascular disease starts at age 15. Not 30, not 40, 15 years of age. All right, let's listen into Fox News.
Our democracy is under attack. Abortion rights, healthcare, masked agents on our streets. Stopping Trump takes a fighter who gets results. Michael Lasher led the charge to Trump-proof New York and protect our democracy. Keep ICE agents out of schools and hospitals. Lasher helped pass New York's strongest gun safety laws and ironclad abortion protections. Michael Lasher.
Now let's think about this. Let's think about this. Again, I was saying that the United States doesn't deserve its prosperity because, most of the people don't deserve the blessing. That doesn't mean that we can't look in the mirror and fix ourselves. And, again, don't bet against America. But most Americans don't deserve the blessing they have. Now, you have people in New York. I live in New York. You have people in New York that are liberal. I'm conservative. All right. Yes, you can go to Harvard and still be conservative. All right. You can live in New York and be a conservative. But there are so many people that are liberal or ultra liberal. And they're demonizing Trump. Oh, you're just killing people. You're killing the Ayatollah. And you're funding, the war in Gaza and all this. You're killing children. All right. And collateral damage is bad in all wars. All wars. All right. So just put that to the side. So you have these ultra liberals in New York protecting abortion rights. No. What they're doing is killing babies. They're killing fetuses in the tune of 65 million fetuses since 1972. 65 million. Now we wonder why we have a population decline. Well, since the last 53 years, we've been killing babies. And it wasn't on the battlefield. It was in a doctor's office. Yeah. 65 million babies killed. But you got ultra liberals that are whining about collateral damage in a war. Why don't they start worrying about the 65 million babies they killed? Now do you understand why I keep on saying that there are many Americans don't deserve the blessing they have?
Former correspondent Trey Ying's live in Tel Aviv after visiting a site of where one of those missiles landed. Trey?
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. I do want to start with the breaking news we brought you last hour. Ismail Khatib, the intelligence minister of Iran, was taken out in a strike overnight. We are told this was a joint Israeli and American intelligence effort. Khatib was one of the individuals responsible for taking down the internet in Iran, and also someone who was tracking Iran's terror cells around the world, sleeper cells in countries that officials here tell us were threatening U.S. politicians and even President Trump. You mentioned off the top, overnight Israel came under new Iranian fire with cluster munitions raining down on the population below. Today, we visited one of those sites just outside of Tel Aviv where 2 people were killed. One neighbor describes what he saw and heard.
And I hear one boom, very strong, and the light is up and down, all the glasses. I hear all the glasses. I tell my wife it's out, and it's in the house. He tell me don't open the door. After 2-3 minutes, I open. I see all the smoke.
You can see here the aftermath of an Iranian cluster munition impact just outside of Tel Aviv. 2 people were killed at this location. These small bomblets exploding in different areas of Tel Aviv, raining down on the population below. We are here with Nadav Shoshani, the spokesperson for the international press of the IDF. Nadav, what happened here?
Well, the Iranian regime has been firing, they've been doing this since day one of the war, they've been firing cluster bombs. Even when they are intercepted, they break off to dozens of smaller bombs, the size of rockets, and then the sites of impact can be deadly, like in this place where they killed 2 70-year-old people.
And there's no precision in this. These are just raining down on the population.
We know this also from intelligence, but also from the type of munitions. And the Iranians are purposely targeting civilians, firing these cluster bombs towards the center of mass populations. These cluster bombs break into dozens of rockets who disperse over miles in the center of a large city and causing this damage to civilian houses.
The Israelis are striking back. There are reports this hour of a new wave of strikes against the Iranian regime going after gas infrastructure there. Guys?
All right, Trey, real quick. On Hezbollah, is it true that their actions have so angered the Lebanese that they're starting to lose political standing within that country? That even Hamas has questioned the reasoning and rationale behind rocketing Israel at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen a shift in tone from...
And then you take a look at what's happening with this report, and you couple it with the metaphysics of what I was saying, and you're seeing how the negative side of Esau is convulsing because it knows it's dying. I don't know when negative Esau dies. All right. So go back to the biblical time. Esau is decapitated. The head of Esau is allowed to be buried with his father in the cave. His body is not, because he was an animal. Now, I believe it's Benjamin that actually cuts his head off. Now, Benjamin is tied to the side of Jacob. All right? So, there's this split of the soul root of Esau. positive and negative. Body is the negative, the head is positive. The head, the intellectual, realizes that he needs to repent and align himself with his father and his brother. But the negative side is still animalistic, and it's going to convulse without intellect to try to cause havoc and destruction. But yet it's like a chicken with its head cut off. It'll eventually die. It's going to run around. It's going to cause havoc, but it'll eventually die. In this plane, on this representation of the material world, the metaphysical of what I just described is manifested with the decapitation of the Ayatollah. And now negative Esau is convulsing. It's causing havoc. But it will die. But that doesn't mean that the energy sectors are going to just start selling down. During this convulsion, the whole world is going to be affected. But it's uncanny on how the biblical story of the death of Esau is actually playing out on a larger stage in 2026. It's almost like a mathematics, a fib sequence, a Fibonacci sequence, where there was an event in the Bible that's a small spiral, but that spiral starts to get bigger and bigger, and we're in the outer orbit of this spiral. It's a similar story. It's not exact, but it's connected because we're part of the same spiral. Hopefully that makes some sense, all right? But that's what's playing out here. We're seeing in our world, in our news daily, the death of negative Esau and the convulsions of that body.
Lebanese prime minister who last week was calling on Hezbollah to stand down and not get directly involved in this war. But overnight, Hezbollah launched dozens of rockets over the border, sending people in northern Israel back into bomb shelters, a significant amount of damage in a number of different locations. The ground forces, though, will be an interesting dynamic in all of this. I spoke with a senior Israeli military official who said that Hezbollah's Radwan forces, these are the special forces that were previously south of the Litani River, have been decimated in the Israeli strikes, not just over the past week and a half, but also during the war last year. And this has indicated that there's actually just several hundred Radwan forces south of the Litani, where there used to be thousands. And so as Israeli troops move deeper into southern Lebanon and they continue to strike the Hezbollah stronghold of southern Beirut, the Dakhla neighborhood, this will continue to weaken Iran's largest proxy in the region, and it gives the Iranian regime less ability to fire on Israel using this terrorist group in Lebanon. Guys?
And Israel would have left them alone, right? They never would have sent rockets into Lebanon, but Lebanon started sending rockets simultaneously with Iran.
Yeah, there was actually a ceasefire in place that was ushered in by the Trump administration. Tom Barak and Morgan Ortagus and other Trump administration officials have been working behind the scenes to try and create some stability between Israel and Lebanon, understanding that Hezbollah still had thousands of rockets and missiles in their arsenal. Hezbollah decided on their own to get directly involved and launched missiles and rockets over the border. And these rockets, while they are less precise than the rockets and missiles that we see from other proxies and the Iranian regime itself, they cause a lot of damage, and they can fire dozens at a time still, and it is an incredibly difficult threat for the population of northern Israel. Israeli officials tell Fox News they still believe that Hezbollah has more than 10,000 rockets and missiles in their arsenal that could be used against Israel, and that is part of the reason that you are seeing these heavy strikes against the Dakhla neighborhood of southern Beirut, where many of these commands are being ordered from.
Yeah, Trey, but we're still not seeing the barrage stack that we saw during the 12-day war, right?
Absolutely. When we look at the back and forth between Israel and Iran, during the 12-day war last summer, there were often dozens of missiles fired in a single barrage, and this was incredibly difficult for Israel's advanced air defense systems to intercept. the threat that we're facing now in terms of the population on the ground, when you see this incoming fire, it's not the precision missiles and the large barrages of dozens of missiles at a time. It's the cluster munition. And you saw in that report that we just delivered from the outskirts of Tel Aviv, one of these munitions can explode over Tel Aviv and rain up to 80 bomblets down on the population below. And each and every one of these bombs has an impact site. And it, as you saw there, can take out the entire apartment in just a single munition. And so that is the threat that the Israeli people are facing right now. But given the fact that the United States and Israel have hunted down these ballistic missile launching positions, they've been very successful in reducing this threat. And that's why you hear from President Trump and other officials saying that the threat from the early days of Operation Epic Fury has been reduced by 90%. They still are going to be able to get off missiles. I spoke with another official who said it will take a few weeks to reduce this ballistic missile threat. But the damage that is caused by these missiles has certainly been reduced as a result of the defensive planning by both the United States and Israel.
But they're making some big eliminations in the battlefield is the Israelis and the U.S. Katav is the latest. He's the intelligence chief in charge of the sleeper cells and a lot of the evil that took place during the uprising in January. Thanks so much, Trey.
Thank you, Trey.
And some of those side
Okay,
attacks
so,
as well. So
some breaking news. Iran's Revolutionary Guard is warning people to get out of energy facilities because of bombings. So right now, the energy market for WTI oil is trading at $98 a barrel right now. Natural gas is trading at 3.062. You've been paying attention to the leveraged ETF for oil longing. That's UCO. That's trading at 42.65. It's been going up and down since the open. It's been flat, but it'll go up and then come back down and go up and come back down. So this is a 3 times leveraged ETF. Now, when you compare it to the underlying, which is the oil future, that's been a little bit more monotonic. So people are concerned in the leverage market for ETFs tied to oil, not to go in so much, at least since the cash market opened. Now, pre-trade, early morning, pre-open, it elevated up by over $2 or so. So there's, right now energy is up. Now Gush, an ETF, that's trading at 39.31. That's for energy exploration producers. That's long. I think that's leveraged. I think that's a 2 times leverage. And the inverse DRIP is trading at 4.7. That's pretty low. That's pretty low for the shorts for oil exploration. So, all right. Please help support the work that I do. All these videos and commentary are for free, but please help support by sharing the links and getting the great supplements that I have. I have structural nanosilver gels. You can get it in a quick dispenser or in the tube form. You use them the same way. If you have a cut, an abrasion, or a minor burn, you apply it on that lesion, it'll help to heal it. It'll speed the process of healing by about a third. You can use it as a topical for your skin daily. If you're sick or someone around you is sick, it behooves you to put it on your hands, around your mouth, around your eyes, around your nose, lightly coat your nostrils. It stays active for 5.5 hours. It's great, especially if you're not feeling well before you go to bed. All right. If you put some of this in your nostrils and you're having copious drainage, this will help to dry up that drainage. So please go to my store and get the structural nanosilver gels. I have vitamin D3. Vitamin D3 is really important to take every day. It helps with your cardiovascular health. It's a gene expression cofactor, so your tissues and your cells perform properly. Vitamin D3 is important to help with bone density. So please go to my store and get the vitamin D3. And if you're not feeling well, if you're sick, right, This helps to get cells to go into apoptosis if it's been infected. That's the reason why it was so important to take vitamin D3 during the crisis of 2020. Resveratrol. Resveratrol helps with youthful gene expression, gets rid of cells that are in senescence, soaks up free radicals, helps the health of the mitochondria. You'll have more energy, and resveratrol helps the basal layer of your skin. This is the reason why you look younger when you take resveratrol. And omega-3 helps with your cardiovascular health, brings down inflammation, and helps your lipid profile. When you do this, when you take this every day, you're reducing your chances of further plaque buildup. Take omega-3, super important for your cardiovascular health. All right, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, what else is blowing up in the world? All right, let's listen into Fox Business.
Struggling to find finance and accounting talent? Join the growing number of companies embracing outsourced finance and accounting.
What is this thing?
Welcome back. New overnight, Israel hitting targets in Beirut, announcing it has killed Iran's intelligence minister in a precision strike. Fox is being told he was responsible for overseeing Iran's entire global terrorist apparatus, including sleeper cells. The U.S., meanwhile, using 5,000-pound bunker buster bombs overnight to take out Iranian missile sites along the Strait of Hormuz. CENTCOM confirming and signaling more strikes are on the way, vowing to wipe out any threats to the United States and her allies. The president writing on Truth Social this morning, I wonder what would happen if we finished off what's left of the Iranian terror state and let the countries that use it, we don't, be responsible for the so-called strait. That would get some of our non-responsive allies in gear and fast. A Department of War official confirming that the supplemental defense request will include funding to support multi-year missile production deals. Lawmakers confirming my reporting that the package could be upwards of $50 billion. Joining me now is Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy. Senator, it's great to have you this morning. Thank you so much for being here. How would you assess the war so far, and what is your reaction to the Defense Department needing to have a supplemental package of $50 billion plus at this point?
The goals were to destroy the Iranian ability to produce a nuclear weapon and their ability to deliver it. Clearly destroying missile sites is part of that. These missile sites were targeting boats, ships off the Straits of Hormuz, but still destroying missile sites in general is helping to achieve that goal. It appears that we're getting there. The enriched uranium is another issue. The $50 billion that's going to be brought to us, of course you want to look at it. You always want to make sure there's not something in there that shouldn't be. On the other hand, I think the Senate is going to support the president as he is in the middle of this. We've got to support our troops, and this will be understood as supporting our troops.
In terms of your role on the Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources, what do you want to see done in terms of loosening up the Strait of Hormuz to limit the spikes in oil and gas right now?
Clearly, this is more about how do we manage worldwide gasoline prices, oil prices, including in the United States. We can do things to expedite permitting in the United States. We can have a permitting reform bill which allows pipelines to be built more quickly. We should support our allies as they do the same. The oil coming out of Venezuela comes to Louisiana. I'm familiar with how our refineries are built to handle that. Let's get as much of that oil out of Venezuela as we can. But in the meantime, bump up our own production.
Well, it's a great point that you make, given the executive orders that President Trump has come out with in terms of the energy capacity in America. Are you expecting to codify those executive orders with regard to permitting beyond what's in the Big Beautiful Bill?
Yeah, so permitting is a big issue. And of course, we need Democrats to support it. But I think they might. Maybe. I mean, if President Trump says turn on the air conditioner on a hot summer day, they're going to say, heck no. But maybe on permitting they will. And if we can get that done, then we can begin to unleash America's natural resources. By the way, Maria, that creates jobs. And not only does it put more oil and gas out there, more electrons out there, but it also creates jobs. So I'm hoping Democrats would support that.
Well, Senator, you've got a lot on your plate, including clearing a major procedural hurdle, voting to open debate on the Save America Act. This is a priority for President Trump, of course, and it's triggered days of a marathon debate showdown. Senate Majority Leader John Thune says he's pessimistic that the Democrats will do anything about it and add to the 60 votes needed to pass the voter legislation. Where do we stand, and do you believe this will ever reach the president's desk?
I don't know that. 73% of Democratic voters support it. About 70%, 83% of Americans in general support it. If Americans weigh in with those Democratic senators, ask them to vote for the common sense legislation that it just asks that you show an ID when you vote. I mean, you show an ID when you get on the airplane.
Right.
You show an ID when you buy a gun. That's a constitutional right. Why shouldn't you just have to show an ID when you vote?
So
now, if they weigh in with those Democratic senators, we'll get them on board.
I'm sorry, pardon me, sir. Are you going to have a talking filibuster to get your colleagues on the record in terms of why they're not supporting this?
I don't know that. I've been for a talking filibuster since I was elected to the Senate, so I'm all for that. So whether or not my colleagues agree, I don't have a whip count. I can't tell you that yet.
Well, look, I don't know how you're going to get the Democrats to agree when they can't even agree to open the Department of Homeland Security, and we are in the middle of a war. The White House sending a letter outlining changes to the Department of Homeland Security to help reach a deal with Democrats and end this 33-day shutdown. It includes expanding ICE body camera use, increasing...
Can you just imagine if there's a major terrorist event that takes place in the United States and Homeland Security was closed? I'm telling you, we're setting ourselves up for failure. But don't bet against America, because there's, a small percentage of the population that actually is smart, that actually gets things done, while most of the country is a bunch of dumbasses.
Oversight of DHS detention facilities. We will, of course, hear the Senate hold a confirmation hearing for Oklahoma Senator Mark Wayne Mullen coming in, President Trump's choice to lead DHS. What are you expecting there? Will he get confirmed?
Yeah, I think Mark Wayne will get confirmed. Right now, we need leadership. You pointed out, the Iranian cyber attackers are already coming at us. And so we need leadership in that department. And so I think Mark Wayne will get through, and Mark Wayne will do a good job.
I'm with Harris Faulkner this morning, and we've been talking about that so far. Harris, jump in here.
Well, thank you very much. Senator, good to see you this morning. Look, I want to go to something that happened last night. The GOP chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Mike McCall, said U.S. boots on the ground in Iran would be a game change and would need congressional approval. Democrat Senator Fetterman has said recently U.S. boots on the ground in Iran would be a red line. Where are you on this issue?
Yeah, I think the president has been clear that he does not, put it this way, the president does not want forever wars. He has said that very clearly. Boots on the ground suggests to the American people that it is the beginning of a war like we had in Iraq and Afghanistan. So I think the president has to come to the American people and make a real case if he wants to do something along those lines.
And to get that uranium out, that's why they've said that they would put boots on the ground, because you want to be able to get to that uranium.
Yeah, so to get into that uranium may require like a lot of boots on the ground. And now you're starting to talk about a lot of casualties. I'm not sure the president has made the case convincingly to the American people. He needs to do that.
Senator, it's great to have you this morning. We so appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Senator Bill Cassidy.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nanosilver toothpaste. This will whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, neutralize, improve your oral cavity, and when you're improving the health of your oral cavity, you're also helping your cardiovascular health and your valvular health. Super important. A lot of people don't realize poor oral hygiene can cause cardiovascular problems. So please go to my store, get the structural nanosilver toothpaste. This neutralizes. This is the reason why you should be using this every day, but especially if you have a cold or something worse, like what we had in 2020. All right, so please go to my store, get the structural nanosilver toothpaste. Max 35, Max 14, or Cleanse will help to boost up your immune system. They're at different price points and at different parts per million, but you use them the same way. Take a teaspoon a day every day, swish in your mouth, gargle about 20 seconds, swallow it. This will help to improve your oral cavity and your oral pharynx, neutralize, maintain your mucosal barrier, and help the health of your epithelial cells. This is super important. It'll boost up your immune system. If you're not feeling well, or someone around you is not feeling well, take a tablespoon or 2 a day. I also have a brand new product on my store, Super Strong Relief. This is a topical that will help to reduce headaches, reduce pain, muscle pain, achy joints, arthritis. It works within 90 seconds or less. So please go to my store, get the Super Strong Relief. It's a very high quality product to relieve that pain that you have. The link is in the description. Go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, I want to see, you know what's sad about the coverage in the United States about what's going on is it's not very good. It's not, mainstream media is not covering the crisis.
Pricey kitchenware.
All right, let's listen into Bloomberg here.
Landing aircraft on that. I think I had to take out a second mortgage for it.
How do you wash that thing then? That's gotta be heavy and big.
It was a gift, not my problem. We checked the markets for you right here. Yeah, you could sacrifice something on that. Right here on Bloomberg Radio, I'm John Tucker, and that is your Bloomberg Business Splash, Scarlett and Paul.
All right, thank you so much, John Tucker. Today's big take is a really interesting one, and it goes to the heart of something I've been really curious about, which is the man who heads up the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC chair, is one person named Brendan Carr. He wields a lot of power. He speaks on behalf of the president. He threatens networks that say things that the president doesn't like. And our Kelsey Griffiths, who is our telecom reporter, has been writing about him and has profiled him in her latest big take. And Kelsey now joins us from Washington. Kelsey, great to speak with you. And this is a deep dive into who Brendan Carr is, because he kind of rose from a bureaucrat within the bowels of the FCC to become, it feels like President Trump's biggest and most vocal enforcer, especially when it comes to going after networks that he says are peddling fake news. Tell us what surprised you the most in your conversations with Brendan Carr and what you learned about Brendan Carr.
Scarlett, I think Brendan Carr is a really interesting figure, like you just said. We have been hearing a lot about him over the last year or so, but like you noted, he's been part of the federal government for a very long time. I think what surprised me the most in sitting down with him for more than 2 hours of conversations over the last few months is that he is so soft-spoken in person, and it is in such a great contrast to the persona that he kind of wields on the internet or wields a little more publicly. So there's sort of this dichotomy of he is a quiet, soft-spoken, very measured lawyer by trade, but he's been able to step into this role in the Trump administration as this prime MAGA flamethrower, and I think that's gotten the president's attention.
Kelsey, in my earlier career covering the media industry, I spent a lot of time at the FCC, a lot of bureaucrats there, but they get stuff done here. But each chairman of the FCC has his or own kind of agenda for how they envision the FCC. Should it be pro-business, pro-regulation? Where is this FCC with Mr. Carr?
So it's interesting that you point that out, because I asked the chairman about that. You know, is media one of your top priorities? And while it has consumed the most oxygen, perhaps in Washington recently, that is not the thing that he sees as being most important to his chairmanship. I think it's something that does get the president's attention, but what Carr told me is that he is really focused on the mobile space economy. He's really excited about kind of clearing the way for some of these big satellite constellation launches so that mobile carriers can provide more coverage from space to fill in those gaps. So I think that's something that he's really excited about, but it's something that gets a little bit less airtime.
I think one thing that bewilders a lot of people is he seems to have
come from out of nowhere to become such a vocal and an outspoken person on behalf of the administration, on behalf of the president, maybe to get his attention, maybe something more. And you dug into his background. He was a big sports fan growing up, and you point out that he was kind of a malleable sports fan. Walk us through what that has meant for his career.
That's right. Brendan Carr has this uncanny ability to sort of pick the winning team and stick to rooting for that team while they're on top. I think we saw that in him being an Orioles fan until he was invited to throw out the first pitch by the Yankees last year. And since then, he's been rooting for the Yankees. He has rooted for Super Bowl teams that tend to do pretty well. So, yes, I think he has really demonstrated that he's able to choose that winning team and show the loyalty there. And I think that's what he's done with President Trump.
The FCC is one of those federal agencies that I think was founded on and prized its political independence. Is that still the case today, do you think?
According to Chairman Carr, no. There's been sort of this shift in interpretation in how independent agencies operate and whether they serve at the will of the president or whether they are appointed by Congress and can serve in an independent capacity. Chairman Carr recently told Congress that the FCC chairman and commissioners serve at the will of the president, and so the president should be able to fire them unilaterally at any time. So the FCC has actually recently removed some language on its website that states its independence.
He's been at the FCC for a long time after graduating from law school. Now he's the head of the FCC. Do we have a sense of what he wants to do next? How is he going to cash in his political chips?
I asked him about that, and he told me he is just trying to hit the ground running, keep doing what he sees as the best job possible, kind of maximizing this position and platform that he's been given. He, so far has really been an FCC lifer. He told me he doesn't have any political ambitions, and he's just trying to kind of finish the job for President Trump.
Kelsey, in your reporting, have you seen anything of how the president feels about Mr. Carr? Has he made any statements about the FCC or Brendan Carr?
Yes, the president has on multiple occasions been very complimentary publicly of Brendan Carr, and he's particularly happy about how Carr has pulled no punches in calling out the quote-unquote fake media, the media coverage that is less than positive for Trump. I think we most recently saw that happen on X when Brendan Carr boosted something that Trump said over the weekend about coverage of the Iran war. And Carr said that he thinks the news networks need to pay attention and do a better job of covering that conflict from both sides.
All right, Kelsey, really appreciate your joining us and fantastic reporting here. Kelsey Griffith is our Bloomberg Telecom reporter in Washington. On her profile of Brendan Carr, the chair of the FCC, the story is called How a Deep State Bureaucrat Became Trump's Fake News Enforcer. Some fantastic details in here.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the way the FCC is set up, there's 5 members, and the current administration gets to appoint 3. Mm-hmm. So the administration will have, definitely a sway on the FCC. That's the political angle of it. But again, from a policy perspective, I always found them to be pretty cut and dry, kind of bland, just hear the rules, that kind of thing. It was really always a question of how supportive will they be of consolidation of certain issues, whether it's telecom or media. And so that's been kind of...
And as Kelsey put it, he's been a lifer at the FCC. He's served under Democratic presidents.
Let's take a look at some other breaking news that's going on here. Let's see what brings 24 live. No. Let's listen into this clip from Bloomberg.
It just shows, I think, that the market has been a little bit complacent about the impact of the war. And when they see the headlines today about Israel and the US hitting this gas field, now this gas field will not have a huge impact on international markets. It's gas that is used at home in Iran. But what it does mean is I think Iran will take it as a signal that the energy system, the global energy system, is fair game. So there's a lot of worry now that means that they will intensify attacks against oil refineries, against oil fields, against export terminals, and indeed concentrate on the Strait of Hormuz. And it will just mean that the pain that's going through the energy system will increase.
I mean, as news director for all of this arc, and whether it's Jumana Bersetji in Dubai with some real risk there in all, what's the Will Kennedy axis where this war becomes critical for our microeconomics? Is it days, Will Kennedy, weeks? Can we get out to May 1st?
It's happening now. It's just not evenly distributed. We've been reporting all week, and you'll have seen it and talked about it, Tom, that if we look away from the flat price of crude oil into how energy markets are playing out in different parts of the world, it is already disruptive, whether it's $5 diesel in the US, with all that means for America's trucking companies and America's farmers, whether it's the fact they're actually rationing fuel in some parts of Asia, like Vietnam and Thailand, or whether it's the fact that Japanese refineries, one of the world's big refining systems, are looking at cutting runs, that China is having to keep fuel at home. It's happening now, and the fact those things are happening means that as the days go by, consumers will be feeling the impact, and they'll be feeling the impact, less money in their pocket. They'll be feeling the impact in the fact that people have got to put their prices up to recoup these rising fuel costs. It's starting to happen. There's always a lag. We remember that from the Ukraine war. But don't concentrate just on the flat price of food. Yes, 108 is a big number, but look at jet fuel markets, fuel oil markets, diesel markets.
The headline comes out off the team that Will Kennedy has. Qatar says Israel striking Iran's gas field, irresponsible step. I mean, Paul, this is stronger language. It's just how you get out to $108 a barrel.
You're right, Tom. I think you're right. So, Will, given that headline here, just in the last couple of days, President Trump has asked some of our erstwhile allies for help in the Strait of Hormuz, mostly been rebuffed by those countries. What's your reporting in London, in Europe, about how our European, allies are viewing kind of what's happening in Iran these days with the U.S. and Israel?
I think most people in governments in Europe would make the following points. They weren't consulted about this war starting. They're extremely dubious about its strategy and what the end game is. And they're also, and I think this is an important point, extremely dubious about what a military solution to the Gulf of Strait of Hormuz looks like. Trump says he wants ships to open this, but when you actually talk to people who understand how the naval operation will work, at a time of war, opening Hormuz to commercial shipping and keeping it open would be an enormous naval task, a task that probably the US Navy, let alone smaller European navies, are not equipped for. This might be part of the solution after the war ends, but I think most governments would say this is not even possible while the conflict is still going on. So you should turn your mind to finding a way to end the conflict. Now, I'm not passing judgment on that view. I'm just trying to reflect what the conversation is like here in London and Paris. But I think that was because we did not ask to be in this conflict, and the way that you're asking us to be involved is not realistic.
Is there concerted efforts on the part of European governments, UK government, to work with the US to try to push for some diplomatic solution here? Or are the Europeans just kind of saying, hey, you guys broke it, you deal with it?
I think a bit of both, probably. I mean, I think they would explore any diplomatic opportunity to bring something around. Whether that exists, whether the European government's the right people to do that, I'm not sure. We know that President Macron of France has spoken to the Iranian president, so those efforts are in place. Obviously, the Gulf states are close allies of European countries, so those conversations between the likes of the UAE and the UK will be going on at the same time. But the only people who are going to end this conflict are the antagonists themselves. So that's what we need to happen. But I think Europe would love the shooting to stop.
Well, one final question, and I look at all the derivatives of oil. We all quote Brent now, folks. $108 a barrel. Let me check that for you. My eyes are failing me this morning. I got to get Will Kennedy glasses. I do better. I look at petrochemicals. I look down the feedstock chain, Will Kennedy, at naphtha and that, what Qatar does, all the petrochemical juggernaut of the Persian, the Arabian Gulf is well. Those prices are moonshotting too, right? When does that industry collapse?
Well, I don't know that, well, two things. Yes, I think there are chemical plants that will run out of some feedstock, and that, you know, if this carries on, naphtha, which is the oil product which you put into chemical plants to make all the plastics and the chemicals that you're talking about, that you rely on, they will slow down. They will, if not close. The other thing I would say was a really interesting story we saw out of Germany today, which is BASF, the great big German chemical giant, operates as an enormous plant in Western Germany. It said it's going to have to raise the price of some of its products by 30%. And that goes back to the point I made to you earlier. We are starting to see the impact of this war, of what it's doing to the energy system, ripple through the economy. It's early days, but you can see it starting to happen.
How much is what's happening in the Middle East will inform what the Fed does next, do you think?
The Fed moves slowly, and so I think it'll mean there's a sentence inserted in this afternoon's statement that says uncertainty has increased. Boy, has it ever. It gives them more reason to wait. They're still trying to figure out how much their insurance easings of late last year has mattered. They're waiting to still see tariff effects. Now they have to wait to see what energy prices do and how much of that passes through. So it probably slows up the Fed, but we're in a transition anyway. The Fed wasn't going to act until the next chair's on board.
Meantime, Vincent, we did get that rate hike out of Australia. I think traders are pricing in 2 hikes from the ECB. But stateside, there's a B of A note today that says the labor market is nowhere where it was in the last energy scare of 22, that inflation's not going to seep into wages, and that the markets may be pricing the Fed too hawkish.
I think the markets are pricing the Fed too hawkish. I think it reminds me a lot of 1990 and the first Iraq war with the first President Bush. Oil prices went up. They ultimately doubled. People worried about inflation. They expected the Fed to follow through. But in the end, it was a demand problem. I think that what we're seeing around the world is a growing tension. Because while we're a net exporter of energy, a lot of our important trading partners are large net importers. So they're taking an immediate price hit. They have to worry about that transfer of their income to the Middle East. So you're going to see more opening up among central bank rates. And the last point to make is, where was the Fed? The Fed was inclined to easing for the last year and a half. And so you got to you have to dislodge that inclination before you get them to go to the other direction. I don't think you do.
Yeah, we've been watching the CME Fed Watch tracker. It has a little column there for hikes, which is a little bit of a new wrinkle. We'll keep our eye on this afternoon. As you mentioned, that spread between WTI and Brent, now the widest since 2019. Vincent, thank you, as always. Good to see you. Vincent Reinhardt.
Same here. Thank you.
So we'll work our way through the Fed.
All right, I'm gonna play a clip by CNN about jet fuel increasing, and this is an interview by CNN with Delta CEO. But before I do, please go to my store and get the olive leaf extract. This will help to bring down inflammation and help you to control your lipid profile. This is dual purpose. This will help to boost up your immune system and help with your cardiovascular health. It's really important to take olive leaf extract every day. And if you're 40 years of age or older, take the digestive enzyme complex. This is really important to break up carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids and reduce the load on your pancreas. When you get older, your pancreas doesn't perform as well, no matter how healthy you are. So it's really important to take every day to help to break up the proteins, the carbohydrates, and the lipids. You'll be able to absorb your nutrients better. And if you're an athlete, younger or older, taking the digestive enzyme complex will help you to break up your pre or post workout fuel source. Also, digestive enzyme complex has bromelain. Bromelain is an enzyme to help break up clots. It's fibrinolytic. And digestive enzyme complex has the proteolytic enzymes to break up glycoproteins. That's really important during the cold season. So it's a great supplement to take to help with the health of your pancreas, to allow you to be able to absorb your nutrients. So take the olive leaf extract, boost up that immune system, and help with your cardiovascular system. And take the digestive enzyme complex to help with your pancreas. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Now let's listen into Delta CEO talking about jet fuel costs doubled.
Over increasing gas prices, and now airlines say they are feeling the pinch. Delta CEO said that jet fuel prices have increased dramatically since the war in Iran broke out.
Jet fuel prices have almost doubled just since the start of the quarter, and that's a fairly significant hit for us, about $400 million in the quarter. That said, the demand strength has been really, really great. There's been a number of fare increases just in the last 2 weeks. The industry, Delta's brand is really strong. And so when you have that level of resilience, you have that strength of pull for demand, customers understand that fuel prices are up. You need this cost doing business. It's incumbent upon us to figure out ways to recover that.
These comments come after CEOs of the nation's top airline companies are imploring Congress to fund DHS and end the partial government shutdown. And new this morning, the TSA's acting deputy administrator is also warning that some smaller airports may even be forced to shut down. Not a good situation here. Let's go live now to CNN senior business reporter David Goldman for more insights. So David, fuel prices have been soaring since the end of February. Walk us through how this is hitting the airlines and how it could trickle down to the consumer.
Yeah, well, you heard Ed Bastian, the CEO of Delta, say that for Delta, they might be able to weather this. They cater to a somewhat higher end customer, somewhat wealthier customer, but he also made the point that for other airlines, this might hurt sooner rather than later, and they might have to raise prices sooner rather than later. If Delta is already raising airfares over the past couple of weeks, you know that other airlines like regional airlines, discount airlines, they're going to start to raise prices for customers as well.
And you have some new reporting, David, on what else could get more expensive because of the war. Where can we expect to see these increases beyond what we're seeing at the pump and potential flights?
Right. I mean, the Strait of Hormuz, as we've been talking about, is locked down. About 20% of the world's oil comes through there, but that's not the only thing. All other ships that don't carry oil but carry other products are also stuck in the Persian Gulf, and they carry things like helium, aluminum. They carry food. They carry fertilizer, which is a key ingredient for food. Food prices could start to surge as well. And one of the other things is natural gas. And remember, our electricity runs on natural gas. One of the big power sucks is AI right now, and natural gas powers that. So all of that could compound and make prices a lot more expensive for people.
Jet fuel prices have doubled, he says, since the war on Iran began. What kind of pressure is this putting on the industry?
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt.
What if, in order to get insights, you didn't have to dig through dashboards anymore? Filter reports, or wait for someone to pull the numbers? What if you could just ask? The new way of working with data is here. Meet Jeannie, your AI analyst. Ask questions in plain English and get instant visualized answers you can trust. Jeannie analyzes your metrics, trends, goals, and forecasts, and connects the dots in seconds. Use it to create dashboards, build metrics, draft reports, all from a simple prompt. Train Jeannie on your...
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt it's pressure. I mean, the hope is that the jet fuel prices, the increase that you're going to see, jet fuel is about 25% of the cost of putting an airplane in there on the operation. So it's a very large amount considering the overall operation. So when that doubles, unfortunately, you're going to see ticket prices go up. The good news is this: ticket prices, domestic airfares, are as low as they've ever been, right? Even before this increase on jet fuel. So it's more affordable than ever been. Oh, yeah. Oh, domestic air travel has gone down 3% since 2019. Nothing else in America has dropped 3% in average price
since 2019. Everything else is up 30%. So yes, this is a spike. We want it to be temporary until you secure the Strait of Hormuz. We're really not going to get there. Hopefully that gets done in the next 45 days, and any sort of price increases are temporary bumps. We're seeing a lot of people booking into the summer right now. So that's a very positive thing. But yeah, if this issue in Iran were to go beyond Memorial Day or something like that, then the way I put it is that the pricing would get a little stickier, right? You'd probably see it last not just through the summer, but maybe even into the fall. So everybody understands whether it's shipping a product to a grocery store or paying the jet fuel prices on an airline. America needs to see the resolution in the next couple months here in Iran.
Let's get some expert perspective on what's ahead here.
Let's go to Bloomberg on balance of power. Just started.
Charlie, I'm trying to find the silver lining here. What's going on?
Oh, what's going on? Stocks lower, oil higher, and Joe Matthew, all of this on a Fed Wednesday, no less. We got you covered. Just under 2 hours to go until we hear from the Federal Reserve. S&P right now down 0.6%. Energy, however, the big story. We're all focused on crude coming out of the Middle East, specifically the Strait of Hormuz. Let us begin with the latest Brent quote. Right now, up 5%, 108.62 for a barrel of Brent crude. West Texas Intermediate crude, 98.35 a barrel. WTI up now by about 2.3%. Bottom line here, Wall Street does remain on edge as strikes on Persian Gulf facilities lift oil prices, stocks and bonds falling on fears that an escalation of the war could trigger more energy disruptions and fuel inflation. S&P down 39 now at 66.77, a drop there of 0.6%. So the S&P in retreat after 2 days of gains. We got the Dow down 452, down 1%. The Nasdaq Composite Index right now down 125, down by about 7%. The VIX holding just above 23 with a 10-year 4.22%, the 2-year 3.70%. Gold down 135 now to 48.70, down 2.7%. And Bitcoin down 4.3%, 71,320 on Bitcoin. Again, under 2 hours away from the latest Fed decision. Jay Powell's news conference at 2:30 p.m. Wall Street time. And by the way, our coverage will kick off at 1:30 p.m. Wall Street time. Officials are widely expected to hold rates steady. Stuart Kaiser is head of U.S. equity trading at Citigroup Global Markets.
You know, I think people are assuming the Fed's going to try to make us a non-event and keep it pretty close to the vest, right? I mean, they have to acknowledge the weak labor market report. They have to acknowledge the upside risk to inflation. But I think they'll probably try to downplay both of those in the sense that the labor market was good. We got one weak report. We're not going to make policy off of one report. And on the inflation side, look, it's been a 2 or 3 week disruption. And I think they're going to kind of focus on the short-term nature of that, but obviously flag the risks if this continues. But I think Chair Powell would like this to be as much of a non-event as possible.
Citigroup's Stuart Kaiser, and by the way, the Bank of Canada, they held rates steady, said it would look through the Middle East war's immediate inflation impact. Energy stocks higher today. ExxonMobil among the oil majors gaining 0.1%. Chevron up by 0.9%. ConocoPhillips up 0.8%. Bottom line here, oil is rallying. WTI, West Texas Intermediate, 98 a barrel up 1.9%. S&P down by 0.6%. Lots going on. That, Joe Matthew, is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, we thank you. Not a lot of great stuff happening in this market today. It has a lot to do with what's coming out of Washington, of course, and as Charlie mentioned, the Persian Gulf. Connecting the dots here on Balance of Power every day, and this Wednesday edition included. Thanks for joining us on Bloomberg Radio. Streaming live on YouTube, search Bloomberg Business News Live, unless you're already dialed into Bloomberg Originals. Get a grip, says the President of the United States. Our headline today is U.S. allies, he says, need to get a grip, step up and help open the Strait of Hormuz. This is just one of several posts on Truth Social that we have seen from the President of the United States this morning, only to face a redhead just as we come to air here at high noon. It happens like that a lot. Enter the Vice President, who's in Michigan today talking about affordability. What will he say to oil executives when they meet? Yeah, that's the news. J.D. Vance to meet American Petroleum Institute board members on Thursday. He's going to huddle with the API. We look forward to convening key officials, says the Vice President. Energy Secretary Wright, bipartisan leaders in Congress and governors are going to have a big confab on the role of American oil and natural gas in supporting reliable energy amid global volatility. Yeah, you heard what Charlie said. Take a look. WTI, 98. We're above $98 a barrel. Remembering we almost kissed $120 at the outset of this whole experience. Brent crude has been in triple-digit territory for some time. It's above $108, up 5%. WTI is up 2%. I mentioned J.D. Vance in Michigan. He's actually talking right now. This is part of the affordability tour. Right there he is. If you're with us on YouTube, he's at the podium. He's, I guess, going to have to get around to oil and gas prices, which in Michigan are up significantly since the start of this operation, as is the case around the country. I say operation, President's still calling it excursion. And we have a lot of news here, by the way. I'll get to what's going on Capitol Hill in a little bit. Half the cabinet seems to be sitting in testimony today, but we've had some pretty big developments in this excursion. The Pentagon says U.S. forces used 5,000-pound deep penetrator munitions on Iranian missile sites along the strait that, quote, pose a risk to international shipping, unquote. That clearly didn't make anybody feel any better. We also have news, and this is more the concern for the oil patch. Iran warned Gulf countries after Israel attacked its South Pars gas field that energy assets are now on the table. We can come blow yours up too, and that's why we're seeing this reaction here in the energy market, in the oil market. Listen to the way the president termed this last evening as he was presented with the Shamrock Bowl. Remember, it was Taoiseach Day yesterday. It's like a distant moment in the past now. The president talking about Iran at the White House. Listen.
We did a little excursion, and we're way ahead of schedule, as you probably noticed. And we've had, we knocked out their Navy, their Air Force, their anti-aircraft equipment, their radar, and their leaders. It's been amazing militarily, but it's something that had to be done.
Yet the strait is still closed, even as the president has repeatedly suggested that we've already won. Another post on Truth Social, and this one's got us wondering. Well, the president's wondering himself. He says, Tyler, I'm sure read this. We'll read it together here, Tyler. I wonder what would happen if we finished off what's left of the Iranian terror state and let the countries that use it, we don't, be responsible for the so-called strait. So-called. That would get some of our non-responsive allies in gear and fast. 3 exclamation points. Our Washington correspondent is on the North Lawn listening to me run through all of this right now, and she's back with us. Tyler Kendall, boy, I'm not actually sure where to begin today. Maybe we should note the fact that the president is leaving the bubble here to go witness the dignified transfer at Dover. What can you tell us?
Well, Joe, if we start with that, we're expecting President Trump to take off on Marine One shortly. You might be able to actually hear the helicopter whirring around us. He's scheduled 1:25 p.m. Eastern. That's when that dignified transfer is going to happen at Dover as we await those 6 service members who have been killed in Iran. As you all know, this happened last Thursday when we saw that refueling aircraft crash in Iraq. It included 3 U.S. Air Force personnel and 3 National Guard.
Energy is starting to sell off. The natural gas futures is at 3.03, and oil now is trading at 96.68.
It's going to be the focus of the president's attention. But of course, as you mentioned, we have also been getting some messages from him out on Truth Social, reiterating the idea that the Strait of Hormuz is really the sole focal point at the moment when it comes to these ongoing operations in Iran.
Yeah, interesting. The president obviously is not happy with our NATO allies specifically, although he's isolated and pointed out Japan, South Korea, and others, Tyler, for not taking part in a coalition, international coalition, to help open the Strait of Hormuz. Remember back in the Bush days, it was the coalition of the willing. Well, there aren't many willing, if any, willing parties right now, Tyler. But the president has also indicated that we do not need them. What's the latest on this? He suggested that he wants an answer by Friday?
Right. So this came in a post from the president earlier today. He seems to be going back and forth between retreating off of his demand for allies to help secure the Strait of Hormuz, but also saying that ultimately we don't need them. Yesterday, he was asked directly which countries the U.S. was in talks with in terms of forming a coalition after he had signaled earlier this week that one could be announced by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. And I think it's fair to say that he sidestepped the question and instead touted bilateral relations between the U.S. and Middle East countries. And as we've discussed about before, this is really highlighting what at this point has been long-strained tensions between the Trump administration and traditional allies when it comes to defense spending. There also appears to be this concern among our allies that if the U.S., if they don't act in the conflict with Iran, then we could see this White House disengage when it comes to the conflict in Ukraine. And I bring that up only because yesterday President Trump brought it up a lot, actually pretty unprompted, saying at one point, quote, "We've helped them in Ukraine, but they will not help us in Iran." So that's just another thread that we should be watching really closely here. But we've heard from a flurry of leaders and allies in the NATO alliance who have been wary at best of meeting the president's demand for naval escorts. It appears that that threshold to actually get involved and send assets is going to be a ceasefire, actually, Joe. For then, maybe we'll see a coalition put into place to then ensure that that ceasefire would hold if we get to that point. But it's not just NATO allies, as you mentioned, others. I would say tomorrow's meeting with the Japanese Prime Minister are expected here at the White House. Comes at quite the time. This meeting, of course, was announced well before the conflict started. And then also on China, if I could just quickly add, I did catch up with the U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer earlier today. Nearly 38% of the oil that flows through the Strait of Hormuz goes to Beijing. He told me that at trade talks earlier this week, U.S. negotiators made it very clear to China that it would be in Beijing's best interest if they get the Strait of Hormuz opened as quickly as possible.
Tyler reminding us she doesn't just talk to me while she's on the launch, she's actually talking with members of the administration. And that's a full story. You can read on the terminal and online with Tyler's byline alongside Skylar Woodhouse. This is an important moment as Jameson Greer points to China. And you do wonder, Tyler, if that's going to be the message from this White House on a go forward here in the coming weeks. Like, hey, you guys use the strait, not us, so maybe you'll keep it open. The president seems to be indicating that on Truth Social. We'll see if there is some break in this standoff at some point soon. Tyler, thank you. Great reporting as always. Tyler Kendall live from the White House. We're just getting started here. That's one end of Pennsylvania Avenue. You should see the anger management exercise that's taking place on the other.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the drops and the lozenges to help to mitigate a sore throat. You can get it in honey and lemon, cherry flavor, and also in blueberry for the drops. And for the lozenges, you can get the vitamin C orange splash and the Manuka honey. Please go to my store, get the lozenges and the drops. The moment you have that throat irritation, take them right away. It's really important to mitigate the problem. Because if you do, your body will be able to fight it easier. If you let it fester, you'll age faster, and it could become a problem. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video and all my videos. Make sure you use discount 5 and you get $5 off any order. All caps, discount 5. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com. So please go to my store, click the link. All right, let's listen into CNBC while we're waiting for balance of power.
The banks are part of the fractional reserve system, right? So they take our $1 million in the bank account, lend out 900 and only have 100 on hand. Private credit actually keeps the loans. And so I think it's a very, very different narrative today. And so that's where I feel confident in what we own. Because I do think it goes down to good underwriting. If you're a good manager, they're going to get through whatever software, et cetera, just like they did in 2020 and 2022.
Right. So it's certainly it's not the same transmission mechanism, Joe. Although I guess you want to keep an eye on how it is, if at all, influencing credit spreads broadly speaking. There was a deal for Qualtrics, a bond deal. Bloomberg reported was pulled yesterday. It was an effort to refinance some private LBO debt.
Yeah, I think you have a lot of things to kind of give consideration to, especially on the fundamental side. What's interesting is the big banks reported really, really good earnings. And there was a very muted response to that. I think what's favorable about the financial sector relative to some other sectors like energy. We suggest, okay, you want to make sure you increase your exposure to energy. Well, it's a very small weighting in the S&P.
Yeah.
You have 76 financial names out of 500 in the S&P 500. Jimmy, real quick on the math, it's about 15%, right? Ownership. So there are places you can go to rotate as a portfolio manager. And what I'm seeing within the financial sector right now is you're seeing a rotation that's available to you. You can go to the exchanges. You could own CME, you could own ICE, you could own Interactive Brokers. You could actually go back to the insurance companies that took a pause.
ICE and the exchange companies that AI is going to kill, supposedly, because the index business.
But they're trading well. Or you could go back to the insurance companies that took the pause in 25 when everyone said, okay, let's own private credit and own the big banks. So the names like Travelers and Allstate and Chubb, they're working well right now. So you can make that rotation within the sector because the availability is there.
Yeah, I mean, it's not true that I just would, as you use banks as a little bit of a weather vane for, how people are feeling risk appetite wise in macro, that's where I wonder if it's still something that has to prove itself.
Okay, maybe it does have to prove itself. That's a good way to put it, because what I would say is, like, this is a reasonable reason for banks to come down on concerns of how much they've lent to this sector. If you're positive on the sector, and I'm not like wildly over the top positive, but I'm simply saying I think the risks are being overstated, then this is the consolidation, the pause that actually sets up for the next leg higher. Of course, I could be wrong. There's real risks here. I don't want to be blowing off the real risks. But if you're bullish on the economy, if you think that private credit maybe has some underwriting problem, but not a systemic problem, then this is the pause that sets up for the next leg higher.
All right, well, coming up, the road ahead.
Crude right now trading higher by 1.5%, 97.63 on WTI. Barrel of Brent though above 108. Brent crude up now by 4.5%. So Wall Street remains on edge. The Dow, the S&P, Nasdaq all in the red. S&P at 66.82, down 0.5%. The Dow down 390, a decline there of 0.8%. Nasdaq is down 119 for the Nasdaq Composite Index, a drop now of 0.5%. The 10-year at 4.22% with a 2-year ahead of the Fed meeting coming up at 2 o'clock Wall Street time. That's when we get the actual decision. Jay Powell's news conference, 2:30 p.m. Again, the 10-year, 4.22% with a 2-year 3.70%. Gold down 2.6%, 48.77 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude 97.70 right now. Brent 108.19. That is an advance of just about 4.6%. After earnings, we do have Macy's shares down now by 2.5%. And Meta Platforms plans to open its first flagship store in Manhattan, expanding its push into physical retail. Shares of Meta Platforms down today by 0.4%. Again, recapping, S&P down 0.5. Balance of power continues now. Back to go to Washington. Once again, your host, here he is, Joe Matthew.
Hey, Charlie, thanks. We'll have more from Charlie Pellet watching the markets for us in about 20 minutes' time here on Balance of Power. Part of our program every day, live from Washington. Thank you for being part of it as well. You made it to Wednesday, and we have a lot to talk about. As the president prepares to leave the White House, we may actually be about to hear from him. I will let you know that the press corps has been gathered on the south driveway, right outside the south portico, for the president's departure to go witness the dignified transfer. This is the second time he has done this in this second term and since the strikes against Iran have begun. The president today will be in Delaware when the remains of 6 American service members arrive. These are the 6 who lost their lives in the KC-135 tanker crash just days ago, the refueling plane that went down over western Iraq, and it brought the U.S. death toll in Operation Epic Fury now to 13. Nearly 200 American service members have been injured, some of them very seriously. And so this is something that we obviously take great care to cover, and if you're the president of the United States, to witness and then meet with the family members. This is a very difficult day, I'm sure, that he and other dignitaries have ahead. And we'll be tracking his movements for you. Beginning with right now, we've got our eyes on the Rose Garden. It's a cold and windy day at the Rose Garden Club. The president will emerge from the Oval Office, maybe take some questions, we don't know. If he just strides across the grass and gets on the helicopter, we will move on, because we're watching as well what's happening today on Capitol Hill. The chairman is wavering, according to Senator Josh Hawley. He's talking about Rand Paul, who brought his not friend Markwayne Mullin up to the committee today. The Department of Homeland Security is, of course, leaderless right now, and Markwayne Mullin, the senator from Oklahoma, is the president's pick to replace Kristi Noem. Rand Paul is in charge of the committee that will be, of course, dispatching this exercise. And you know they have some bad blood. I talked about this with Senator Paul on the program last week, remembering that Markwayne Mullin referred to him as a snake. There was another word in there that I can't use on the air because of his difficulty as a member, I guess if you ask Mullin, as a member of the Republican-led Senate. He's frequently a no vote. They don't get along. And I guess, you know, at that point, Mullin had even suggested that he understood why Rand Paul's neighbor attacked him, assaulted him while he was mowing his lawn a couple of years ago. So obviously there was going to be some fireworks here, and the senator promised that. Well, he was pretty coy about it when we asked him. He said, you will want to go to the hearing to find out for yourself. And here's how it went at the outset of this conversation. Listen.
You told the media that I was a freaking snake and that you completely understood why I had been assaulted. I just wonder if someone who applauds violence against their political opponents is the right person to lead an agency that has struggled to accept limits to the proper use of force.
As far as my terms as a snake in the grass, sir, I work around this room to try to fix problems. I've worked with many people in this room. Seems like you fight Republicans more than you work with us. I did address those remarks. I did explain your gimmicks by the amendment you put forth. And as far as me saying that I invoke violence, I don't think anybody should be hit by surprise.
In fact, he was hit from behind. Boy, I guess, you know, everyone just says, I guess should have just said the quote, Rand Paul got to it. By the way, it did not get better. And when Gary Peters, the ranking member, started his questioning, you start realizing, wait, Democrats and Republicans have a problem here. Unless your name is John Fetterman, he's voting yes. And it's funny, this is Washington. Everyone knows he's going to get confirmed, but we have to go through this exercise first. Hold on to that thought. It may have just gotten more complicated. This is a really remarkable development here. Reporter at Punchbowl posting a segment of this hearing, because again, it's still underway here. Markwayne Mullin's trip to Afghanistan, which has been written about in most of the tip sheets and a couple of papers ahead of the confirmation testimony this morning. Nobody knows what he did over there. He's talked about being smelling the smell of war, that he's seen things he can't talk about. Gary Peters, again, ranking member, asked him if he'd go to the SCIF today to disclose details. Mullin says he can't because it's classified. They're now questioning why it's classified and pushing for details. Rand Paul says, I'm still willing to have the vote tomorrow, but I can cancel it. So like everything around here lately, it's getting more complicated as we go. Nathan Dean is watching this whole thing, so you don't have to. Of course, senior policy analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence. Nathan, what do we make of this? Could this vote go off the rails?
So at this point, I don't think so. I mean, obviously, we don't know what the situation is. We don't know what is actually going on in terms of what happened in that trip that Senator Peters is referring to. But, you know, because the Senate Homeland Security Committee is 8-7, when Senator Paul says he's going to vote no, Senator Fetterman says he's going to vote aye, that puts it out of the committee. So that's where I think this is going. I don't think that Senator Mullin's nomination is at risk here, but, you know, it just goes to delay further work. And that's what we're seeing, especially with the Save America Act and what's going on in the floor at the moment. There's a lot of stuff that's happening in the Senate, but a lot of it is just being delayed by this type of political theater that you're seeing at the moment.
Is that all it is? I mean, if you're Rand Paul, it's pretty personal, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, obviously, Senator Paul has a much more personal opinion here, and obviously, I think that, you know, if they were to, you know, get into a room, they would use other words that we can't use here on television. But what I would say is that Senator Paul is also a politician, and Senator Paul also understands that, you know, this is not something that the Republican Party needs to have a fight over. I mean, if you look at President Trump's approval ratings, and you just look at the prediction markets of where the elections are headed this moment, it's not good for the Republicans. So as long as this fight continues, it just puts up a picture for the Republican Party that this intra-fighting, if you will, sort of supports the narrative that there are challenges for this party going into the midterm. So even though both of those individuals, again, probably don't like each other and they're not sharing holiday cards, I do think that Senator Paul does see the benefit of trying to move this forward if that's where eventually this is headed. Because let's remember, even if it's blocked at committee, there are steps that the Senate can do to discharge it and put it directly on the floor, but it just takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, and that's effort that Senator Thune does not want to use at the moment.
Do we know anything about what the security work he was doing in the Middle East? He was in multiple war zones, apparently, before running for Congress in 2012. This is after he sold the plumbing business. There's been some reporting that he was working as a missionary. Nathan, do you have any idea what we're talking about?
I actually don't. I mean, Senator Peters' question was, outside of vacations, have you traveled anywhere abroad? And, Senator Mullen said no. And then, Senator Peters came back and said, well, the FBI report said you've been to Jordan and Azerbaijan, and then you've done some work. And so then that's what started this rolling thing, this questioning here. But I'm definitely interested to see what our Bloomberg News colleagues come up with, because there seems to be something here.
Wait. There's apparently no public record. I said Afghanistan, but that's not what we're talking about here. Like he was careful not to mention his service in I don't know. I guess there could be multiple theaters here involved, but I guess if it's classified, we'll never know, right?
Well, I mean, look, obviously we'll see what the reporters come up with. I mean, obviously, there's obviously some interesting reporting that's going to come out from this, but at the end of the day, I think this just really is another indication of delaying what is coming down. I mean, if you have like a DHS shutdown, you have a crypto bill, you have a housing bill, there's a lot of work here that Congress needs to do. And just when you get into this type of confirmation hearing and you push things off even further and you push votes off even further, it just delays. And because let's remember, we have this election coming up in November. So there is going to be a point, I always like telling my clients, it's around April or May, where all 435 members of the House and 1/3 of the Senate are like, get me out of this town because I need to go home and campaign for this election. And so if these delays add up, it's just going to make it even more difficult to pass legislation.
President Trump is concerned about more than this right now. He's concerned about I got to be careful, the Save America Act. Did you see him on Truth Social? He says, for all the fake news out there, is he talking about me? It's called the Save America Act, not the Save Act. Nobody knows what the Save Act means. Triple exclamation point. The first version was called the Save Act, right? If I lost my mind, the president says he will not sign. This is the priority. No legislation until this is passed, Nathan. Last time we talked a week ago, there were not the votes to pass it in the Senate. How about now?
Still not the votes. I mean, we had a client call in this morning and say, is there any way that the Republicans can get the votes here? And no, unless you are agreed to do away with the filibuster and you get a majority vote in the Senate, the votes aren't there, and we don't see the filibuster going away anytime soon. So again, what we're seeing here is Senator Thune is in a pickle. He needs to figure out a way to show that he's fighting for this for President Trump, but it's going to offer up multiple days of debates. I really feel for the senators right now because they have to stay close to the chamber in case there's a forum called or anything like that. So there's going to be a lot of debates here, a lot of questions, but ultimately this is not going to go forward. And like I said before, every day they're spending on this, they're not working on something else. And especially when it comes to the DHS shutdown, I would just say is that, we have a 2-week recess coming up. So if there's no movement on the DHS shutdown by next week, the Senate and the House, they're scheduled to be gone for 2 weeks. So, there's a lot of work that needs to be done here. But again, the Save America Act is just not going anywhere.
You getting phone calls? You can tell me if I'm wrong. I'm guessing that people aren't calling a lot about the Save America Act, but maybe about DHS. They're waiting in line at TSA. We have about 30 seconds. Nathan, what are people upset about when they call you?
Honestly, they ask if they should be getting on a plane or how early they should be going to the airport. And I say it's not my area, but I can help you out there. But what I'll say is that, look, we saw both sides are blaming each other. And we saw a couple of instances, but I'm not sure where they're going to get this done next week.
Wowee. It's great to have you, as always, Nathan Dean, who's, by the way, part of this family at Balance of Power, not just on the program, but you can listen to Nathan's weekly Washington Policy Pulse call by subscribing to the Balance of Power podcast. We're all in the same boat here in the newsroom. And we thank Nathan.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the heirloom barley. This will help to detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, and soak up free radicals through superoxide dismutase. By bringing down inflammation, soaking up free radicals, and detoxifying your body, you're helping your endocrine system, your immune system, your brain function, your cardiovascular system, also your joints. By bringing down inflammation, you're helping with joint health. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Take the heirloom barley daily. This is going to help to slow down the aging process. Myotrol, super important to reduce atrophy. If you're 40 years of age or older, male or female, you will benefit from Myotrol. Do some resistance training, take the Myotrol. This will help to build muscle and maintain muscle. Help with the health of your mitochondria so you have energy to maintain that muscle. Myotrol has polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans to help with the gene expression to build muscle. So please go to my store, get the Myotrol. Also, collagen. Collagen is a supplement. It's a new product on my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link's in the description. Collagen will help to remodel your joints. If you have problems because of aging and arthritis or a sports injury, you can help remodel your joints by taking the collagen. Collagen will help to use collagen type 2 to help with the cartilage and help to use ACAN to help to cushion the joint. It will also block certain types of enzymes like MMP3 and MMP13. Those enzymes degrade the joint. So if you block them, you're reducing joint rust. Also, collagen can help to block pain by inhibiting EP4. And collagen helps to recruit glucosamine to help to remodel the cartilage, and chondroitin to help with the cushioning of the joint. Take this every day and do a little bit of resistance training or some exercises, such as if you have your elbow, let's just say that you have joint pain in your elbow. So when you're extending, it, let's say, hurts. Okay? Get to the point where it's hurting and go a little bit more and hold it there for about 20 seconds. Do that twice each day. And over time, you'll be able to open up the joint more. All right. And what you're doing is in taking the collagen and doing this simple exercise, you will eventually start sending signals to help to remodel the joint. All right. And you're kind of stretching it out a little bit, but you have to do it slowly. And once you're able to do it completely and either flexing or extending, then you add a little bit of weight, just small amount of weight, and then you do the same thing until you get to the point of pain. You go a little bit more and count to 20 seconds, and then do that twice a day. And eventually you'll get to a point where you're strengthening the joint, you're stretching it out, and you're moving it, and you're creating a signal for growth and remodeling. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the collagen.
Street, we do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. Just over an hour away from the latest Fed decision, Jay Powell's news conference is at 2:30 p.m. Wall Street time. Officials are widely expected to hold rates steady. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ, all in the red. Wall Street remains on edge as strikes on Persian Gulf facilities lift oil prices. West Texas Intermediate crude at 98.01 a barrel. WTI up now by 1.9%. We are seeing a bigger move in Brent crude, up almost 5%. 108.45 right now for a barrel of Brent. S&P down 41 to 66.74, drop there of 0.6%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 444 points, down 1%. Nasdaq is down 0.7%. The VIX at 23. The 10-year, 4.22%, and the 2-year, 3.71%. Gold is down 2.6%, 48.77 the ounce, and again, West Texas Intermediate crude, 97.89 a barrel, up by 1.8%. Getting word that Saudi Arabia has ramped up its oil exports to more than half of normal levels, despite the disruptions from the Iran war. Well, geopolitical concerns, specifically higher energy prices, certainly one major concern for the Fed. But what about the broader economic backdrop heading into today's meeting? Peter Cheer is head of macro strategy at Academy Securities.
So if you start seeing companies not get access to credit, you get a slowdown there. I think individuals, we're seeing some of that again as well, where we've been talking about this for a little while, but the working poor, there seems to be an increasing number of people who have jobs and are still struggling to make ends meet. And that's a very unique situation. We've never really had a recession kind of caused by that. So I think these things are all adding together. And if I'm the Fed, I'm going to try and be more dovish. I don't think they will be. But I think there's risks from all sorts of things that are hitting us right now.
Academy's Peter Cheer interviewed this morning on surveillance. The Bank of Canada today held rates steady and said it will look through the Middle East war's immediate inflation impact. Again, West Texas Intermediate crude 97.87 a barrel, up 1.7%. Oil majors higher. ExxonMobil up 0.5%. Chevron up 1.1%. ConocoPhillips up by 1%. For on-demand news, 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcast. And back we go to Washington as Balance of Power continues. Once again, your host here is Joe Matthew.
All right, Charlie, we thank you. Charlie, we'll be back at the top of the hour as we count down to the Fed. 1 p.m. Eastern time. We'll have the latest as we welcome our global television audience here to Balance of Power. And indeed, less than an hour from now, our special coverage begins on this Fed Day in Washington. There's so much going on that the chairman is actually competing for attention today. Not from the president, of course. Donald Trump on Truth Social. When is too late, Powell lowering interest rates? That's all it says. TJT. Interesting as well, this break in gold that Charlie points to. Breaking recent support around $5,000 an ounce. The miners are following lower. This seems a big decline. Agnico Eagle's down like 5% right now. Barrick, Newmont, all lower. With Scotiabank analysts saying that defensive price action is suggestive here of some fear heading into the Fed. So we're going to have a lot to listen to when Jay Powell, of course, reaches the podium. Statement at 2, you know the drill, news conference to follow. You'll hear and see it all right here on Bloomberg, on the radio, on YouTube, on TV, if you're near one. Get used to the name, Juliana Stratton. She is likely to become the next senator from Illinois. It was a primary night last night, you know. We talked a lot about this. Beat Raja Krishnamurthy by nearly 7 points, and beat Robin Kelly by even more, winning the Democratic primary that is basically the equivalent of winning the general election, because we're talking about, well, Illinois. We want to get through some of this. There was a lot of spending on these races and some down balance as well that got our attention. And so we assemble our political panel. Bloomberg Politics contributors Jeannie Shanzano, Democracy Visiting Fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center, and Rick Davis, partner at Stone Court Capital, our Republican strategist, with us now. Jeannie, what do you think? This is kind of amazing, by the way. The lines like this jump off the page in 2026. Stratton would become only the 6th Black woman to have ever served in the chamber. Will she?
She absolutely will. I mean, it is, for Democrats, a celebratory reality. But of course, for people who love democracy, love the government, love elections, it's a little bit troubling that in a lot of these very blue and very red states, we don't have general elections that decide who's going to go to DC. These things are decided in primaries. But it is She ran an incredible campaign. She came well from behind, according to some of the polls. She had an amazing debate a few months ago. She's also somebody who speaks her mind, and I think Chuck Schumer, my state senator, has got to be a little concerned because this is somebody who said she wouldn't support him for leader. So she is somebody who comes to the Senate, and she will come to the Senate, I'm fairly certain, next year. And she is going to be thinking about changing a Washington, D.C. that she feels like, in a Democratic Party that she feels like has become too embedded. And I think that's why you saw the support she got from a very enthusiastic Democratic base.
Well, and a Democratic governor in this case. Stratton, of course, lieutenant governor, and it's J.B. Pritzker. Rick Davis is getting a lot of credit for giving her such a good run. Tammy Duckworth as well. And I'm just wondering if you're buying into this narrative this morning of the Pritzker effect, knowing that he's got his eyes on 2028. Is there such a thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a risk to take if you're J.B. Pritzker, who's got his eye, as you say, on running for president, to sort of stick your neck out in a competitive primary. And what is he really going to get out of it? Well, he gets an ally in the state, and Illinois is not insignificant when it comes to the Democratic Party politics. But two, he shows some muscle to be able to, sort of take his brand of Democratic Party politics and create a successor. And let me tell you, I know it just doesn't seem realistic, but like there are very few governors, very few senators who have successful efforts at placing a successor in their job. And he has found one to go into the Senate who's going to carry a Pritzker moniker into that caucus with Democrats in the Senate, some others of whom are also looking to run for president. So it's a gamble, but it paid off in this instance. But it also shows you that J.B. Pritzker is willing to stick his neck out, put his money where his mouth is. He virtually funded this entire campaign with his own dollars, and now he gets to reap the benefits of that.
Well, is he a front runner for 2028, Jeannie, or was it too early for this conversation? Because we were talking about him in the last election.
Yeah, it's never too early, Joe Matthew, to have a good conversation about the next presidential election in the United States. Of course, we are in an invisible primary. We have seen so many people coming forward, whether it's publishing books, testing the waters. And yeah, J.B. Pritzker is, in the top of that group with a real shot. He has, of course, unlimited amounts of money. He's got enormous name recognition. I don't know if you have the clip of what he had to say last night about Dear Mr. President, but he was clearly out last night on his victory lap, trying to take it directly to Donald Trump, as he has been for months. So he is in the upper part of this group. And for Democrats, following along on Texas, there's a couple things about last night that are really striking, but top among them was the enthusiasm amongst Democrats continued. By some counts, they say the turnout amongst Democrats was similar to the last contentious Democratic primary in 2020. Those are big numbers, and that's, of course, why Donald Trump pushing for the Save the Vote Act and trying to take away mail-in balloting and speaking out against the sanctity of the election is so problematic for Republicans, because the enthusiasm is front and center on the Democratic side, and we've seen it now in 2 successive primaries.
We talked quite a bit yesterday about the massive spending that AIPAC was putting behind several congressional races. There were 4 of them, 4 primaries in Illinois. They got 2 out of 4. And I look no further than Evanston, north of Chicago, the affluent suburb, where Mayor Daniel Biss managed to pull out a win here over a 26-year-old social media star and a state senator, despite the fact that AIPAC threw lots of money at this race. AIPAC spent, I believe, $21 million in total. And when the mayor got to the podium last evening, Rick, it was quite a moment. He said, "Enough about AIPAC. May tonight be the last time I uttered their name. This victory belongs to J Street." And this is something that you pointed us to here. We actually had someone from J Street on the program yesterday. And the incredible tension between these 2 groups, Rick, what does the race in Evanston tell you about AIPAC versus J Street?
Yeah, well, I mean, it is the definition of competing alliances as it relates to a common goal. Both J Street and AIPAC are firm believers in Israel being a reliable ally of the United States. They happen to disagree with the leadership, in Israel in the approach, and yet they have tapped into enormous amounts of political funding from people across the United States who believe that they should be supported because members of Congress who support Israel make America stronger. I buy that. And the fact that AIPAC has got an acid test on the kinds of pro-Israel supporters that they're willing to fund, as well as the opposite being in the J Street, makes for incredibly good political watching. I mean, these are folks spending tens of millions of dollars in these states. I think AIPAC spent $20 million across the board in these 4 races in Illinois. And that means it's having a significant impact on the outcome of these races. As you pointed out, they don't win them all, but they're definitely influencing all of them. And J Street, probably slightly less well-funded, but equally active in these states, are less of an acid test for candidates. And at this time, in this environment, they're finding a lot of uptick. So it's going to be a fascinating primary to watch these guys duke it out state by state.
What do you think about this, Jeannie, to the extent that we learned anything last evening? There was more than $30 million dropped in these 4 congressional primaries. AIPAC, as we've established, was responsible for more than 20 million of it.
Yeah, the numbers are utterly astounding when you think about it. And that race you were just talking about in the 9th was fascinating for so many reasons, including AIPAC's role. Because when their favorite candidate didn't seem to be pulling, the numbers that they would have wanted to see, they turned and started pouring money into a candidate to keep Kat, and I'm going to butcher her name, Joe. How do you say it? Abagazella? Off I'm giving it a shot. Off of the podium, and of course, then you had the former Evanston mayor, Daniel Biss, who himself is no, real moderate, win, but he might not have won, and we might have seen her win. And she is quite an interesting candidate from so many perspectives. She's young, she's media savvy, but think about the amount of money that was going in against her. So, AIPAC certainly had a huge impact. They are crowing about their successes, but of course, it's important to note that what they did was they kept somebody, they didn't really get their candidate, they kept somebody that they found objectionable from winning. And in another case, they got their candidate. And I also think it's noteworthy that they have been quieter about showing where their money is going, although, of course, Bloomberg has been able to tease it out, because we've seen support for not Israel, but the Netanyahu administration taking a hit in the United States for some time now. And they have to respond to that, which is where I think the sort of interview you did with the J Street had yesterday and the sort of differences between these organizations is so fascinating in these races.
Look at this. As we spent time with Jeannie Shanzino and Rick Davis, our great panel today, Bloomberg Politics contributors, the President of the United States getting on Air Force One. He did not, we should note, he did not take questions at the White House before he got on the chopper, and just now he is not taking questions at Andrews either. Up the staircase to Air Force One, they will move on to Dover for the dignified transfer. We're going to have a lot more, of course, in our next hour with our panel, and we're going to have the latest on the situation in Iran, including our conversation with Congresswoman Haley Stevens, the Democrat from Michigan, who's a candidate for U.S. Senate. Rick, I just want to touch on this really quickly with you, if you could forgive the change of topic. How important is it for the Commander-in-Chief to be present for these at Dover?
Oh, I think it's incredibly important. First of all, America has always highly treasured its service personnel. When we talk about expending blood and treasure, it is not an insignificant thing that we put people in harm's way to preserve the life that we live and the influence we have around the world. So when we do take losses, it's incumbent upon our leadership to honor those as they would honor anything else.
Well, I appreciate your saying that, Rick. These are the 6 who lost their lives when the KC-135 air-to-air refueler went down over western Iraq last week, and we'll have much more on that and the situation in Iran coming up in our second hour with our great panel, only here on Bloomberg.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Boomer Boost. The Boomer Boost has 68 nutrients. You mix it with soft foods, filtered water, a smoothie, or even with just milk. I normally mix it with hummus. Take it every day, and this is going to help with brain function, cardiovascular health, help to build muscle, rev up your metabolism, increase your energy levels. It'll slow down the aging process, help you to bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals, and it's going to increase your longevity, slow down the aging process. Really important to take every day. And you can stack it with C60. C60 is a very potent antioxidant. You can get it in MCT coconut oil, avocado oil, and extra virgin olive oil. You can get it in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration. You take it every day, a teaspoon a day, and this will improve your skin, your cardiovascular health, brain function, immune system boost. It helps to boost up that immune system, helps to improve your endocrine system. It soaks up free radicals at the tissue and cellular level, reduces inflammation, helps the health of the mitochondria, and it boosts up energy levels. It even helps the basal layer of your skin. You take this every day, teaspoon a day, preferably on an empty stomach, you're going to notice huge improvements in your slowing down the aging process, and you will visibly look younger. All right? It's really that simple. Before and after, take a before and after picture and take this every day. Right? Now, you get added benefits when you stack it with other supplements that I have in my store, especially with the Boomer Boost. But this stacks really well with resveratrol, the Max 35. It stacks well with the turmeric, the ashwagandha, and the lignans. Now, by taking C60 every day, you will also notice that you'll have better energy. Again, your immune system and your endocrine system will be improved. You will have better neuroplasticity for your brain. You'll be thinking better. All right. And the reason why is you're helping the health of your mitochondria and your neurons, and you're boosting up your energy levels, so you'll have the energy to be able to build the neurotransmitters. So when your neurons are healthier, bringing down that inflammation, soaking up those free radicals, reducing the stress, you'll have positive neuroplasticity and be thinking faster and better memory. So take C60 every day, slow down that aging process. And again, if you stack it, you'll get added benefits. You should also make sure that you do a holistic approach. Proper diet and exercise, stretching, doing some resistance training and some cardio training, a little bit heavier on the resistance training. We're about a 65-35 split. Mindfulness to get that parasympathetic nervous system kicked in. These are all holistic approaches to slow down the aging process. Proper supplementation and other modalities will slow down the aging process. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. That's the end of my broadcast. Oil right now is trading at $27 a barrel because of the news event that took place. But I do think that things will stabilize in the near term, and oil should start to decline. But if there are additional news events that take place where there is a destruction of oil refineries or oil production in the region, then Brent crude is going to be going up, and the energy sector it will start to trade up, especially the futures markets in natural gas and in oil. So there's a lot of event risk. Thank you for listening, and have a nice day.